Good evening and welcome to the 22nd meeting of the Milton Planning Board fiscal year 2025. At this time, I would like to now call the meeting to order. We will begin with our administrative items, which include first the approval of minutes. And first we're going to introduce ourselves. Yes, thank you. I'd like to begin by introducing the board and our staff. If you'd like to begin, Sean?
Sean Fahey, member.
Jim Davis, member.
Cheryl Tagaya, secretary.
Maggie Oldfield, member.
And Meredith Hall, serving as chair. And with us, but not in the room, she's in her office, we have Julia Getman. Unfortunately, Cheyenne is out with the flu, so thinking of her and hope she feels better soon. Now we can move to the approval of our minutes. And Cheryl, we're still working on edits for those. There were two sets of edits that were from the 28th of January, and just double check the dates. But since we don't have the edits,
3rd and the 28th.
the 23rd and the 28th.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Julia. So since we're still working on the edits, they are not ready to be approved this evening. So I would ask for a motion to defer the minutes.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The next discussion of the next meeting dates, we currently, we had to schedule a meeting for next Thursday, the 20th, which should be a very brief meeting. It is essentially because of the zoning articles. At our last meeting, at the last public hearing that we had, we moved to discuss them on the following Tuesday, but we actually did not take a vote to continue the public hearing. So in that case, what happens is it ends the public hearing. So we are going to simply, on next Thursday, reopen the zoning articles. We can't make any changes unless the warrant committee recommends that we make a change. That would be an opportunity, and that is, I guess, the good thing about having it right before town meeting. If there are any changes that are needed or suggested by the warrant committee, we would have an opportunity to do that. If there are no changes, we would simply close the public hearing on that. And so that will be next Thursday. Hopefully you can, everyone can make it.
Is it a Zoom or
It's
in
fully
person?
Zoom. It's fully Zoom, fully remote for that meeting. And it should be very brief. I mean, a half hour.
7 o'clock?
At 7 o'clock, yeah. So that is on the 20th. And then we will have, Julia is reserving the room for us. I think, Julia, did we say 7:15?
Yeah.
Or I think you were going to reserve them. So on Monday and Tuesday night, just if there's anything that comes up that we would need to discuss, we will have that and have a room reserved before the town meeting on the 24th and 25th. And then we have a regular scheduled meeting on the 27th. At this time, we don't have anything that we absolutely have to have on the 27th. So because we will have had quite a few meetings, I know we'll discuss yours, but at this time, I think unless we have something very on the 26th, because we will have had Monday, Tuesday, possibly Wednesday town meeting, and so, and we will have just had that the 20th. So we will have Bassett Street coming back on the 13th. So certainly we could continue any other public hearings until the 13th as well. I don't know if, and if
13th of March.
And then that would be 13th, yeah, it's confusing because we have tonight's 13th and then the March 13th meeting. And if something did come up that we needed to, we could add a meeting that first week in March. But I think at this time we will be through our zoning articles, which will be great to have those. And hopefully we have a few other things that we've been able to wrap up too. So.
And we'll have to talk about a forum for East Milton overlay.
And then, oh yes, and then that is one thing, Julia, that and we'll discuss that I think when we get to that.
Yep, okay.
When Josh comes on, is that we'll want to schedule a public forum and have him come, and that could be that first week, and depending on how soon he can do it and how soon we can post it and let everyone know, so, to come. But we'll discuss that later.
So for now, we'll plan for the 13th of March?
Yes,
Okay.
yep.
So we're going to go a month without a regular scheduled meeting?
We will meet, well, we'll have the 24th, the 25th, the 20th, 24th, 25th pre-meetings. And then,
And
Yeah,
did
if
we,
because 10 Bassett Street, they couldn't get into the ZBA, so that's why they're not until the 13th.
I know later on the agenda, we have discussion of the East Milton overlay zoning as well as MBTA zoning. And we talked about having East Milton zoning submitted for the May town meeting. So
Yes.
when does that opportunity to submit, is the warrant closed?
Well, I thought we would discuss that tonight. The warrant closes, we would have to have our article, and if we, depending on how we feel tonight, if we feel ready to submit it, the 27th is the
Okay,
deadline.
so
For getting the zoning articles in. That's when they were asking for them.
Okay, so you think there's adequate time without needing
I think
a
if
meeting for a
tonight-
month?
I think if tonight we feel comfortable, we could submit it now and at least let town council, I'd like to let town council get as much time to review it as possible, and just see if there's any recommended revisions, but get it to, at least after the warrant committee, after their stretch of meetings, not that they're going to want to look at another article, but at least they'll have it and they can schedule at their convenience. But I thought we could decide that. If we decide we need that 27th, at that, after Josh comes, we certainly could get that back. So maybe we just leave it open for now until we get through tonight and see.
Yeah, I think that would be good to do.
That's good, yeah.
Yeah.
And so we'll discuss all the items on here, but
Okay.
I was just tentatively thinking about that in advance. Staff update. Did Cheyenne give you anything, Julia, that you wanted to discuss?
Only that there's an A&R coming for 572 Harlan Street. He dropped off some plans on Tuesday and an application. So we should put that on an agenda at some point.
Okay, all
And
right.
what was the address, Julia?
572
572
Harlan.
Harlan?
Yeah, 572.
And we'll want Cheyenne to review that too.
But there is a requirement for opening the hearing on an A&R upon receipt. I don't recall how many days,
Yeah.
but that's something to look at
It is,
with Cheyenne as well before deciding about the meetings.
If the 13th would, if that,
Yes, A&R.
filing an
I
A&R.
thought it was 30 days, but it can be on a meeting, it's not a hearing process, you don't have to
Yeah.
advertise.
Okay,
But
We'll
we should-
confirm,
we should look
yeah.
at the-
we'll confirm that, because, we want to make sure that that's, because that,
Yeah, while we're not required to advertise, it's been our practice to because residents, neighbors have asked us to do that.
right.
So we do need to be mindful of that too, so.
And I did want Cheyenne to look over the A&R to make sure that everything that they need to submit, that they have properly submitted. So with her being sick, she wasn't able to
Sure.
to take a look at that this week, but just to make sure that it does qualify as an A&R.
Okay.
Okay, so the next thing we have is our citizens speak. If there's anyone from the public who would like to speak on something that's...
You can go. Yeah, I'll go first.
Yep, great. Welcome.
Joe Curran, Grafton Ave. I want to just talk about the East Milton Overlay District. I spoke at the Select Board meeting, and I heard while you were speaking, you're going to meet with the residents, which is what I asked to make sure the Select Board did, and I heard that you're going to have this forum, and that makes me very happy. I won't repeat everything I said at the Select Board meeting. Some of you were there. I want to commend you on what you've done, and that's what I tried to say in that meeting. I know this has been a long, hard process, and I'm appreciative of it. The forum is really, for me, is the last part of this. My neighbors as a Precinct 7 town meeting member, have been asking me about this. It's important to us, and I do appreciate everything that you're doing. The only thing that I'm unsure of, and I'm not looking for a response now, is in watching this, I think there's some sort of 3-year look ahead where you can come back and change it without potentially coming back to the citizens. And I don't know if that's true, but I saw it somewhere in some of the conversations potentially, and that just bothered me if that were true. And I know you have a lot of work to do, so thank you very much.
It's not true that we could change the zoning without going back through town meeting if it were adopted, but the one thing that we can change are the guidelines, design guidelines.
The design guidelines.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe that's where
Yeah,
I'm.
That
maybe.
might be what, yeah.
That does not require town meeting.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
thank you very much, and I look forward to the forum.
Great,
And my
great.
neighbors also.
Yeah, and everything will be on the website, so you can look at all the different
Yep, thank you.
documents. Great. Anyone else? Yes.
Brian Kelly, town meeting member from Precinct 7, 11 Hope Ave. At a recent planning board meeting regarding the Thayer Nursery special permit renewal, there was a complaint regarding a gathering on the property. Maggie Oldfield is a politically active member of the Milton community, and when I asked if we could hold I feel kind of guilty about this, because when I asked if we could hold a political meeting in one of her beautiful flowering gardens, she was more than happy to oblige. It was a delightful evening. We gathered for potluck to eat and strategize and celebrate recent political victories. This was not a dance party. It was citizens with concerns about Milton's future. I am here because I heard discussion about perhaps requiring a gate or a request to require a gate at the nursery to stop unpermitted activities. I am here to speak against any such action, as it could very well impede our civil rights to gather. It may be possible that the complainant does not share some of our political views and is trying to stop us from gathering. I don't know if that's true or not. Someone did call the police, and they came and they left without an incident, and we continued our meeting. The right to political gathering is a fundamental aspect of civil rights, primarily protected under the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. This amendment ensures the freedom of assembly, allowing individuals to gather peacefully for political purposes, express their views, and petition the government for a redress of grievances. From a civil rights context, civil rights are designed to protect individuals from discrimination and ensure equal participation in political and social life. The right to assemble is a vital part of these protections, allowing citizens to engage in political discourse and advocacy. In Massachusetts, local zoning laws are governed by Chapter 48 of the Massachusetts General Laws, which give cities and towns the authority to adopt ordinances and bylaws to regulate land use. However, these laws generally cannot prohibit political gatherings outright. And the last thing I'll leave you with is, according to the ACLU, they have a statement on this. The right to assemble and protest peacefully is among the most important in a democratic society, and the ACLU has long been a champion in this field. We work to ensure that governments do not charge unreasonable costs for the right to protest, deny equal rights of expression for viewpoints or speakers with whom they may not agree, or otherwise unlawfully restrict the right to gather and express. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else who would like to speak? And we have, I don't know who we have on Zoom too, but yes, if you'd like to please come.
There's 2 hands raised on
Okay,
Zoom.
I just want to make sure we let people know that they will get to speak as well, so.
Phil Johanning, 23 Parkwood Drive. I'm just taking exception to what the recent gentleman said. I did vote no, and I supported John Cohane. But the fact is that we do have subsection N, and it's part of the zoning law of Milton. And the thing I'd like to say is that Maggie could have held the gathering at her house. She has plenty of space. Denny could have held the gathering at her place. She has plenty of space. Instead, for some reason, it was held behind my house. And it was not, I agree, it wasn't a dance party, but there were loudspeakers, there was chanting, it was more than, and there were some comments last time about, well, what if Josh decided to have a party? And Cheryl pointed out he can talk to his neighbors. The Richettis live at 270 Hillside Street. They have parties routinely in the summer. I have never made one comment about the Richettis, and I don't mind if they do what they want to do. But the Richettis' parties are nothing like the gathering that was held at Thayer Nursery. And I think it's great for people to have the right to assemble, fine. But they can do it. They can do it at Maggie's house, or they can do it at Denny's house. They don't have to do it at what is basically my house. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Okay, and Julia, if you can let us know
Eric,
who's
Eric Hokinson has a hand.
okay. Welcome.
Thank you, Eric Hokinson. Throughout the campaign leading up to last year's vote on the MBTA zoning, a lot of arguments were made about the trolley not being rapid transit and how it wasn't fair that Milton was classified as a rapid transit community. Instead, many argued that Milton should be an adjacent community. And the chair of the select board reiterated this recently. It's not about being anti-housing, but about being fair. Tonight, I'm not here to debate about whether it's rapid transit or not. But after last year's vote, the planning board committed to developing 2 zoning articles for the town. One is if Milton were a rapid transit community, and one is if it were an adjacent community. Nearly 1 year later, we have neither. And now the planning board is unequivocally stating that it has no plans to produce either. While the nullification of the guidelines by the SJC last month effectively extended the deadline for compliance, the planning board and a group of residents are now attempting to rewrite the law by creating a new category for Milton and for Milton alone, a category that would require even less zoning capacity than an adjacent community. This is contrary to what the planning board publicly promised it would do, and what many of the no voters even said was fair. To date, the public has not heard the planning board cogently explain why it is ignoring the plain language of the statute that requires HLC to develop regulations for compliance, and why it is pursuing the singular path instead of preparing for all potential outcomes. Based upon recent conversations and news reports, many believe that the planning board is still going to develop plans for both 25% and 10% alternatives, but are unaware of the effort to do, and to do only less. Because the only result of this action will be even more legal costs and less state funding at a time when we are discussing a nearly $10 million override, it is only fair for the planning board to explain to residents, whether they voted yes, no, or not at all, why it is not preparing for all possible outcomes. The SJC was clear. Milton must comply with the law. While the form of that compliance may not be finalized yet, Milton residents deserve to be ready to comply with the law, whether we're rapid transit or an adjacent community. The planning board has had time to make progress on these plans, and it's time for the board to do what it promised it would do, to plan for the future of this town. Please resume discussions on the district's scorecards, re-engage the town's consultants, and more importantly, invite the public to speak sometime other than a Thursday night at 7 p.m. A good start would be to reschedule the public meetings that the planning board canceled last November. Please do your part so that we will be ready to comply with the law. We know we will have to, and that's what's fair for us. Thank you.
Thank you. And Julia, who else do you see?
We have Carrie White.
Great. Okay. Welcome, Carrie. Go ahead. I believe you're still muted, Carrie. Carrie's hand is down.
Okay.
Julia, do you see her hand is down now?
Yeah, her hand is down.
Okay.
We have Douglas Hine, with his hand raised.
Okay. Welcome, Doug.
Good evening, everybody. Doug Hine, 453 Elliott, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 2. I know we've got the action plan deadline due in about 4.5 hours. don't think we're going to make that, but that's actually not why I wanted to say a few words today. I want to pose a question, and this is not rhetorical. It's a legitimate question that I want each of you to kind of hold in your own hearts, and that is, do you acknowledge the possibility that at some point in time we may be required to comply with a zoning scheme that categorizes us as a rapid transit community? And like I said, that's not a rhetorical question. The reason why I'm asking something, I guess, so basic, is that I've got about 22, 23 years of being an attorney under my belt, and it's very common for clients of mine to come into the office and want something to be true so badly that they simply can't acknowledge the possibility that the outcome they desire is not what's going to happen. And I think there's no question that the supermajority of this board, feels that the HLC guidelines are unfair, improper, illegal, and I have some real deep reservations about them as well. I've been pretty vocal about the fact that I don't like what's going to happen to my street if we have to have a plan that complies with the rapid transit community designation. But be that as it may, if it's the law, it's the law. What I'm suggesting to you all is that we need to be realistic about the possibility that we're going to be forced to take action at some point in time. Eric said a lot of the points I wanted to make about going forward and drafting a plan that complies with a rapid transit designation. And also, it doesn't limit your ability to draft alternate plans that either have us as an adjacent community or something entirely different. I certainly don't think it's a bad idea to have different options on the table. But here's the reason why I think you should continue to work on a rapid transit categorization compliant plan to prevent the worst case scenario. And the worst case scenario is the thing that what people I think don't like about the MBTA Communities Act to begin with: loss of control over our zoning. And I'm not saying this to use hyperbole or try and scare you or anything like that. The Commonwealth itself, in their pleadings, have asked as relief to have the court appoint a special master to dictate precisely what our zoning would be if we don't do it ourselves. That's the worst case scenario. And it's something that really should concern this board and this town. And I don't think people are worried about that possibility. That's why I started off by asking the basic question: do you acknowledge that's a possibility? It is. And something that grave you have to guard against. The only way to do that is to go forward with a rapid transit plan. That doesn't mean that you have to put it to a vote at town meeting. It just means that you have to have a plan ready to go. Because if you don't, and if the worst case scenario does happen, and if a special master is appointed, that person might look to the past to find a compliant plan. And by that, I'm certainly referring to the one that passed town meeting, but then was ultimately defeated by a townwide vote by a significant margin. I think the residents of East Milton should want you to come up with a rapid transit compliant plan. The work that's been done over the past summer, I think, were steps in the right direction and addressed a lot of the fears from that section of town and took a lot of the newly zoned housing out of East Milton, away from the on-ramp, and put it in different parts throughout town. But if you don't go forward with that plan and at least have it ready to go, if a special master gets appointed, the folks at East Milton might be looking at you and asking, well, why didn't you have an alternate plan ready to go? And certainly when doing that, whether it's drafting that plan or alternate plans, have community meetings. Let the public know about what you're thinking, what you're trying to do. I think that's the best thing that you can possibly do to guard against that worst case scenario. And I've kind of accepted the fact that there's going to be some form of litigation in this case. I think there's just no two ways about it. I think, I wouldn't be surprised if we get sued in the near term over this emergency guidelines and the action plan. I think that would be kind of a dumb suit, but because it doesn't get at the real heart of what I think people have a problem with the regulations. But those chips are going to fall where they may. Guard against that worst case scenario. You might not want it to happen. You might not think it's going to happen. I have life insurance. I hope I'm around for a long time, but I pay those premiums every year because you got to guard against the worst case scenario. And moving forward, drafting a variety of plans does that. So I'd urge you to continue that hard work that you folks
Thank you,
started.
Ted. Thank you. That's good. Okay. All right, I think it's time we should move on at this point. I think that was everybody. Next item on the agenda is our East Milton Square zoning with MAPC. And Julia, do we have Josh with us? Is Josh
Yes. Yep.
here? All right, so we can invite him in.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi, Josh. Welcome back.
To turn my video on, I will need to be a panelist, however.
Okay. Julia, can you make Josh a panelist? Oh, there you are. Okay. Great, thank you.
So do you want me to start off?
Yes, all right. I didn't know if you were all set. Okay, ready.
Oh, sorry.
Welcome. If you'd like to begin just by introducing yourself again for those who are...
Josh Fiala, Principal Planner and Land Use Manager at the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, been assisting the town with the East Milton Square zoning.
Great. Thank you. And if you'd like to run through, you had sent a memo with some of the updated changes, which were great. If you just want to go through and have any comments that you would like to make initially?
Sure. Would you like me to bring that up on the screen?
Sure, that would be great.
Okay, here's the memo that I prepared based upon the conversations, I believe in the last two planning board, maybe not the last two consecutively for the board, but the last two which I have joined you with. And these were changes to both the commentary memo, the zoning language itself, and the East Milton Square design guidelines document. I would say relatively minor comments and changes overall, but I think some important following up on important conversations that we had together. Let's see if I'll just touch on some of the more consequential, fewer typographical type errors that we don't need to go over again. We did add an additional purpose statement at the suggestion of the board to preserve and enhance the historic character of East Milton. We modified some of the language around the historic preservation provisions to clarify those and when the additional review would be required if deemed historically important, making that clarification in the language. Clarified the streetscape improvements and made a very specific suggestion about similar to the investments recently near Manning Community Park and the related streetscape improvements there. Made a mention of gooseneck lighting, which also shows up in the guidelines relative to exterior illumination of signage. And clarified some items which are in the commentary memo only, more about just making sure that some of the references there were accurate, which are cleaned up now. And so that all occurred within the commentary memo and the zoning language itself. In the design guidelines document, we changed a reference to drugstores to a reference to pharmacies, and then modified the date ranges to correspond with the 1940 date cutoff to deem a property historically significant to trigger further review, and therefore reorganized the date ranges of the percentages of buildings which were built within the different ranges to also hit 1940 so that can be seen more easily.
Great. Good. That was an excellent summary. Did anyone have questions on any of these changes that were made? Josh, I just had one question. If you could you pull up the memorandum document?
Okay.
On page 16, and I don't know whether this was during the change, but the first sentence isn't complete, and then I think it could be, let's see, at least in the draft that I have, page 16 at the bottom. It would be at the very bottom, under maximum building height, below the looking forward quote. It begins with, if the proposed zoning as currently recommended. See,
Yes.
so then what, and I was thinking you could actually take out, add the bottom sentence, and then you could say MAPC recommends that the town consider increasing. So you could just,
Yeah, I might suggest in that first sentence, adding additional modifications might warrant exploration or something to
yeah,
that effect.
that's great. Is that acceptable to?
So can you show where that would go again?
It's
That's right here.
right.
So that would read, if the proposed zoning as currently recommended is not successful in attracting future development, then future zoning, sorry, I said it better the first time, exploration of future zoning modifications may be warranted.
I think that's excellent.
So I like the change. Now, is that an example of something that would not have to go to town meeting?
This
Is
is
that a
the
design
comment, this is
guideline
the
or-
commentary, so it's
Okay.
not the language
Yeah,
of the zoning. This
right.
is just in the commentary that
Okay.
I think would be on the website, on the town
Yeah.
website, but it wouldn't be in the body of the
Not part of the
zoning.
zoning, yeah.
But just to be clear though, what that sentence is suggesting would be something that would go to town meeting.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yes, yes.
Good enough. Thank you.
Great.
Josh, I just have one question, and it just kind of surprised me. It read in one of the changes that you made that, I think it's a change that you made, that 17% of the parcels have no structure. Is that right? 17% have no structure. Just struck me that there were that many
Parking lot.
parcels that.
Yeah, I was too. I was surprised.
Yeah, I think the parcel lines may not exactly correspond to how people perceive like whole properties. I think there might be some portions of a property may, for example, be split into two, where the parking lot, for example, is actually technically a separate parcel,
Okay.
which adds to that percentage.
Okay, yeah, in that respect, that's a bit misleading, but maybe my interpretation was incorrect, but
So-
thanks.
So Josh, then, not to avoid being redundant, this last sentence then says, then MAPC recommends that the town increase, which I would like to say, consider increasing, because I don't think it's absolute. We would consider it. But is that redundant to the first sentence? Then MAPC recommends.
I think.
Or just MAPC recommends and taking then? I guess it's the then, starting the sentence seems awkward. I don't,
Okay. Yeah, I can clean that up. I
would,
do like leaving the first sentence more general, because we offer some suggestions, but there might be other things, that the town might consider
right.
in the future that are not listed here.
MAPC recommends that the town consider increasing. Would then, let me see, would then recommend? MAPC would then recommend? Because it's reactive to the,
Okay, yeah.
so. considering.
Having trouble with the comment
That's
feature
okay.
here.
That's
There we
right.
go. Okay.
Yeah,
Got
to
it.
consider. Yeah, that's, okay. Because sometimes those reports come back or those comments come back and.
It didn't
So-
capture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he's got it just as a note in the side.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've got
That's
them here. So
Okay.
yes, sorry, I'm in a PDF right now, not the Word document, so it's not, I can't live edit, but
Got it. Okay.
I've got them all as comments here.
Okay.
What we just talked about.
so I thought those, any other comments from the board on anything? No, I thought those were great, all those, the changes that were made were good. The only thing I'm still sort of struggling with the map. So, and honestly, I don't know that we have to make a final decision on the map before we do a community forum. We might want to get public input from the community. And again, I'm fine with the post office because I do think it has some protective, the underlying zoning would always still be there, which is commercial. It would just be, there would be triggers for historic. So I did feel better about that. What I did think that we really should think carefully about is the fruit center it's a residentially zoned parcel. And if you look at the map, it's the biggest parcel, which could have the greatest impact to the residential neighbors buffering it. So I would think, because I mean, the map would, it would be smaller, it would fall mostly along the Granite Avenue and Adam Street. But by removing that, it would give us just additional site plan approval and, if it was a significant change that I think we would have the opportunity to weigh in. If we did this by right, we're automatically allowing a height, a certain amount of height, a certain amount of.
I think one thing that we can see through some of the applications that have come before us, which is businesses that have been operating, or a business use has been operating on a property for decades and decades and decades, but yet the underlying zoning is not business. And so any change is risky, and therefore it limits the opportunity for the property, and it really, I think, puts the use at risk. So having a clear path is much better for everyone, I think, for the business owner, for the neighbors, and for the planning board. Because having to decide whether it jumps to ZBA or not, or whether permits are triggered here or there, when we have these uses that are so long business that it's just not productive to have residential zoning underlying it. So if we're going to try and move our zoning forward, it seems to me we should tackle that. We shouldn't leave it out. I think we put the protection in site plan approval that allows us to guide, and this would have site plan approval. Even under as of right. And I think, we all spoke quite a bit at the warrant committee about why we felt it was really important to keep that in.
Right.
So that's, to me, strikes the balance, of what you're talking about in terms of being concerned about a process. I think that site plan approval gives us a process, but it also gives us a more predictable path. So.
Yeah, it's just something to consider. I think, Jim, you had brought up that. I think you were the one who brought up, but.
Really torn on this one, because we're now changing the rules for 20 abutters and then beyond in that neighborhood. And by right is by right.
And I think that's where the advantage will be when we have a public forum, and we get to hear from the East Milton residents. I would like to not necessarily make the decision tonight, but I do think it's an important direction that we want to get public input on, especially
One
in
thing
the
I also
East
want,
Milton neighborhood.
sorry,
Yeah, okay.
just one other thing is that when the Falcones were looking at their property on Bassett Street, and there was a lot of angst amongst the community. Residents came to the planning board and said, give us an overlay, give us a clear path so that we don't have to negotiate each property. And we're not doing that if we selectively take some properties out. So that's just another thing that I think we should consider.
Yeah.
And also, we need to consider, we're also undergoing an economic development plan at some point. And I think whatever sort of we decide on this business in this residential district would set a precedent for other businesses in other residential neighborhoods. So I would proceed with some caution because there are a lot of other businesses, mine included, that are in residential neighborhoods. And I really would advocate, if we do for this one, we would have to do for all. So it is beyond, this conversation I think is beyond just East Milton. We have other, not just my business, but other businesses in residential neighborhoods. You know, you look down on Canton Ave at Franny's Corner. So there's a lot of, down on Brook Road at Milton Food Mart, where we did pass some zoning in the past few years and nothing's happened there. But that's another corner, as well as the 7-Eleven on Route 28. So if that's the road we want to go down, then I think that we have to look at townwide.
We've been
Could I just
studying.
Oh, yeah, Josh, go ahead.
But I just wanted to add one detail to the conversation right there that may differentiate this parcel relative to some other business properties in a residential zone. The property today is technically a split zone property, so it does have a portion of its front near Granite Ave corners, which are in the business district. So it is both business and residentially zoned today.
Right. Yep, that's true. That's helpful. And I think in all of this, we'll need to listen to the public and want to hear how folks feel about it. But I agree with Cheryl what you're saying. This is one of the goals that we're trying to achieve, is to offer opportunities that prevent 40B projects. So that's
Having a more predictable path provides opportunity for property owners that they don't have now. And that's, I think, something people need to recognize is one of the challenges that we have. We have, no offense to our applicant coming up, but we get Dover protected uses and we get 40Bs on properties that were something else besides single family, when there's no other alternative for them than the single family. So we have to recognize that that's been an issue, and we should address that issue. And it's, like I said, it's not, some might wonder why we have had at least 3 daycare centers reviewed since I've been on the board, at least 3. And we haven't had too many mixed-use developments. We haven't had too many business. We've had some minor modifications, but our business districts have changed very little in decades and decades and decades. And we have to recognize it's our regulatory environment that's causing that in large part.
Well, there's different pros. Yeah, we won't go there. But I just wanted to put a pin in that because I didn't know if we wanted to express any opinion. My feeling is I'd like to wait and through the forums and public hearings, let
But if we
We
plan to
keep it in.
submit.
I think we keep it in.
All right,
Yeah.
because if we plan to submit, we need a map, as
Yeah.
we learned recently,
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
If we've missed the maps, then we're
Yep.
not
And it
really
wouldn't be,
having
we wouldn't
zoning.
be adding more, we would be taking it, during the process. So, okay. So Josh, continue if you want to highlight anything else topic-wise.
I think that was it. I think the map was, we have discussed previously, and it sounds like the board is comfortable enough perhaps to, as you just discussed, take it for further discussion, final discussion with the community. And if depending on how that conversation goes, we can make some revisions. But proceeding with, I would say that if the desire is to submit a package to get it in line with the warrant, I think you have a package which is ready to do so, and then can be subject to further final adjustments.
I would agree. Should we look at meeting dates now for a possible forum? We would have to post it, so we need at least 2 paper news cycles. So Julia, what would be sort of the earliest time frame that we could host a public forum?
Well, ads have to go into the paper the Tuesday before noon, before the paper comes out. So, looking at the calendar, if we got it posted on this coming Tuesday, the 18th, it could go in the paper on the 20th and 22nd, and then we could have a forum on the 6th at the earliest.
Does the 6th work for people?
Sorry.
Josh, does that work for you?
March 6th?
March 6th. I think we had tentatively talked about the 6th as
Yeah,
doing the
because
forum.
I think I put a hold on it, so that works for me.
I do have another evening forum on the 6th.
Okay, all right.
What about the 5th?
Would the 5th work?
The 5th, that week is tough.
Okay.
The 5th does not work for me as well.
Okay. And you're saying that whole week, because I think you would prefer to go to the following week then, with that?
The 10th, 11th, 12th, is that too late for the warrant?
Cheryl and I have something on the 12th, a meeting on the 12th, but the 10th or the 11th?
I have, that's when the Milton Marketplace is at the ZBA. So I don't know if that's the best time, because people might be tuning in who would be interested in both. So maybe the 11th?
The
Yeah,
11th?
the ZBA is on the 10th.
Yeah.
Right, ZBA is on the 10th.
So we could meet on the,
So we could meet on the 11th?
would that work, Josh, for you?
That would work, I believe. Let me just see. I'm going to check my colleague's calendar so I can have a...
And that's before, yes.
Yeah, Tuesday, March 11th, that looks like it would work.
Okay, great. Let's plan on doing the forum on the 11th. Did we do it at 6 a little bit earlier?
I think it depends which room it's in. Like if you
think
do the
we-
library, you probably want to be at 6:30. If you do
I think we had wanted to do it back at the Arts Center.
worked
at the
out
Arts
well.
Center, right, okay. So we definitely would need to check their availability.
Yeah. All right, why don't we do that, Julia? Can you tomorrow morning, if you have a chance, check the availability at the Milton Arts Center?
Sure.
And then send an email confirming with Josh and the board?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we're shooting for 6:30 or 7 at the Art Center?
7 would probably be better for people to get home from work. So 7 p.m.?
Okay, and would your second choice be the library?
I think so. That the library would be the second choice? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would be good. Great, Josh, you did a wonderful job with that last time, so That'll be
Thank
great
you.
to have you back for that.
Does the board have any suggestions or preferences about the format of that meeting? A presentation, I imagine, but do you have more of an open house or Q&A, or what do you think the community might best benefit from in terms of form?
I kind of like the same as last time with the survey and people were able to.
Well, at this point, though, we're further along in the process,
We
so.
sort of have our plan to present, and we will have already
all right.
submitted it to the warrant committee.
Oh,
Just for review, just to start looking at it.
So
Or town council.
I guess the question is what, the goal of it is just to get feedback and allow for some revisions depending on the feedback.
I think one thing I would suggest, if you think about the people who went to the last forum and didn't tune into the planning board meetings since then, is kind of bring them back up to speed to how you took the feedback and you adjusted the zone, or you drafted the zoning based on that feedback, based on all the content that you, and the comments that you received. Because that's what you told us, right, some time ago, and then we've reviewed it a couple of times. So I think it's just bring them along, bring people along to where we are today from there. And I think we set the table that we've been at this a long time and we've taken a lot of feedback, and we have some opportunity for some additional comment, but we hope that they agree that it's ready to go to a vote.
And so maybe we can send this to the East Milton Neighborhood Association and have them distribute it, especially with all the commentary, so they understand how we got to.
I would also say to the Chamber of Commerce, because remember, most of these property owners are business property owners, not residential property owners. So they have, in my mind, they should have as much of a say as anyone.
Yeah. And then maybe, Josh, we could run through the design guidelines, because I think that, just some pictures always help people, and you did a great job, putting together some examples, just sort of highlighting things, not going in detail.
So one thing I might suggest too, because a lot of people may not be familiar with how the process works, when we say something's as of right on a 3-story, let's just talk about what that looks like once this passes. Somebody wants to come in and they want to do an application for one of these properties. What does this zoning tell them, and then what's the process that they would follow in submitting a project, and how there's opportunity for community feedback during that application process. So, because it can be very technical and we're used to looking at zoning language, but for most people, it's, I think we want to explain what it does for them, what's beneficial, like I said a few minutes ago, about setting a process that's more predictable. And people's comments have already been put into this zoning, and so those would stay. They don't have to renegotiate all of those things on any application that comes in. I think those are the kinds of things that are important to communicate.
And
I think, I'm sorry, to support what your thoughts are, this type of language, and there's a lot that's been prepared here. It's overwhelming for someone who's just picking it up to look at it and trying to ascertain whether they're supportive or whether they have questions. I think what you're describing is probably how a lot of people will be challenged by this, but if Josh could do some examples, let's say, for example, and Josh create 3 or 4 examples of different projects that might, this might be applicable for, and let people understand whatever those particular projects might be, how it would work. You know what I mean? It would. I think it would be helpful for people, because an awful lot of people, there's a lot of information here that's just not this is part of your language every single day, but it's not everybody has your professional experience and background. I think it'd be really helpful.
What do you think about that, Josh? I don't think Sean's asking you to design projects.
Not at all.
I think he's
Not at all. No, Josh, but for example, say, if an applicant that wanted to propose this type of a project and describe something, and just create a few of those scenarios that residents could hear you explain, and they'd be able to recognize how this overlay would allow projects to be built.
And maybe take, like the Milton Marketplace as an example. That's the largest piece in this puzzle. And/or the Citizens Bank on Granite Ave. And use that footprint and plop on a visual, like a worst-case scenario visual, so people could see what
Well, the problem
could be
is
there.
then he has to make some program assumptions and design assumptions. I think one thing you could do is take it and diagram out where the setbacks would be, what the building envelope could be, Josh, maybe what the parking requirement would be if you reached the maximum floor area that you could build, something
Yeah.
like that.
Yes, yeah.
I think you started doing that at one point when you were showing us.
Santander Bank.
Yes, exactly.
I think opening up with the background and context that you've written, sort of going back to the beginning and telling the story about how we got to where we are right now, and some of that history. And then I think your commentary, you could almost pull this up and go through your commentary and read from those sections, because I think those are really, really helpful. And maybe highlight some of those, touch on, building height, what's in the zoning, rather than going through just the zoning, which is strictly, it is.
Yeah, I
this
think
is more.
I think the important thing for people to understand, it allows a mixed use. It requires a portion of first floor commercial. It allows a total of 3 stories under site plan approval, which is the as of right piece of it. Lay out what the parking requirements are. But then I also would say lay out what the challenges are, as you did, in the commentary, and lay out what we hope to, accomplish with it. That's really the important part.
And there's a lot of protections in here for East Milton, so we want to let them know historic character, what all the goals are and sort of the protections. So I don't know if like an hour dedicated to that, but I would like to allow. I want to hear from East Milton if we can at that time, and allow them, maybe the first hour we present an overview and then open it up for questions for the residents.
So one thing, just thinking about having watched and heard select board meetings recently and discussion of an override, and hearing people comment about our structural deficit and lack of commercial tax revenue. One thing you can think about is kind of what kind of economic opportunity might this unlock in East Milton? I think that was one of the early drivers of this too, is that our business districts aren't contributing a lot to the overall revenue of the town. So in part because our zoning really has so many restrictions, it's pretty difficult to redevelop any of the properties currently. So how, Josh, you did a build out analysis in Milton Village where we kind of estimated how much commercial space and how many units might be yielded if, certain percentage of the property did change over. Is that a complicated or time-consuming thing to do at this juncture? Or is there something that could give us some estimate of what the opportunity this zoning brings from an economic development point of view?
They typically are a bit complicated and quite dependent on the assumptions that we make in terms of development program and approach to the various properties. And it's unclear whether or not that effort would be helpful, because it's not, as I think we've discussed this at length in other circumstances, but the difficulty always with build-out analyses is that it compresses what is typically an incremental and long redevelopment and reinvestment process in a district to a single number, and it gives the impression that that type of change will happen overnight or with the flip of a switch or the approval of zoning, and that is not in fact how real estate reinvestment and redevelopment works. It will take years, if not decades, for a substantial build out and reinvestment to occur, even with the zoning changes that we're
Okay, so
contemplating.
I think we can talk about it,
But-
that is an
But what
opportunity.
about, like, if you were going to pick like 2 or 3 properties, like Sean suggested, and you would at least do the math to determine what that new development program might be, then we could look at what that might generate from tax revenue as compared to what's generated now, and just use one example, or 2 or 3 examples, you know.
So the concern that I have with that is similar to the concern with RKG's analysis with MBTA zoning, was just, this is for mixed use, and they assume a fewer amount of kids in our school system. So that's what I'm a little bit hesitant. I've listened to conversations about new growth in the town, and even when I talk to the assessor, they're always talking about, oh, this is new growth, but they never really project new expenses. So there's always a trade-off for new growth. So that's why I'm a little bit, so I'd like to see the revenue part of it coming in. But we have to also be realistic, since we are creating the opportunity for new housing, more housing. There just would be more expenses too.
All right, so
Okay,
maybe that's
just-
something that we can talk about without quantifying, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think the language that's in here is good, talking,
Yes.
that Josh has written on opportunities in that area.
So,
Great,
so I think I'm comfortable tonight advancing the article for the Maytown meeting.
Is-
Anyone make a motion?
motion?
I'll make a motion to submit the East Milton mixed-use overlay zoning. Did we call it a PUD, by the way, Josh, on this one? No. Okay.
No.
We did not.
Okay, so the East Milton mixed-use overlay zoning for consideration for the May town meeting.
Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Can I just amend
Yeah,
that,
sure.
sorry,
Yeah.
with the map that's
With the map,
attached?
yeah, which would have to go with it, yeah.
Are you amending it?
Yeah, yeah, second the amendment.
Okay.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Great. So Julia, we can send maybe, maybe we wait, just touch base, but we'll let the select board know this is going to be coming. I know they were already thinking about Maytown meeting and what was going to be, what articles and what things would come forth. So we'll connect on that.
So can I just say to
Yeah.
Josh too?
Yeah.
Josh, thank you. It's been a journey. It feels like a culmination of many, many years of work, and you brought us in this last leg of it, picked up the last leg, so thank you.
You've done an excellent job. Yeah, I'm really grateful. So
Thank you all for your labors in it and effort and dedication to it, and we hope that the community receives it well at that final forum, and we believe it has been very responsive to the community's requests and needs.
Great, thanks very much, Josh.
thank you.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening, and we'll confirm with you as soon as we hear that Milton Arts Center or what the location would be.
Fantastic, thank you.
Great, thanks, Josh.
Great. All right, so next we have the 227 Pleasant Street, Pine Hills Garden as built plan. We had a few things to come in today, but Marion, if you want to come and join us and.
And can I just say something?
Oh, yes, sorry.
So I just wanted to let you know that I spoke with the State Ethics Commission today regarding the potential of an appearance of a conflict of interest, because my business has hired Attorney McGetrick and has hired the engineer DeSalle Burke, who is involved in this agenda item. Ethics suggested I file a written disclosure, and I did that today with the town clerk, and I'm just publicly stating that. And they said, because I do not have any financial interest in this agenda item now, that I'm able to participate in this discussion.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And welcome, Marion. Nice to have you.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
No, I'm just here tonight to talk to you about an as-built plan for 227 Pleasant Street, which is Pine Gardens development. It's a small development with pretty big houses. It's on a little hill off Pleasant Street, and it's taken several years to be completed, but all of the houses have been constructed. Mostly they were sold, the lots were sold, and then the houses were constructed by the developer with the new owner. And each house has an occupancy permit and is occupied. We did finally have to sell Burke finish an as-built certified plan. The as-built plan shows the lot layout, shows where the roadway is, shows where the utilities are, the drainage systems. It's not all of the pages of the plan for the subdivision, but it's important. And one other thing that had to be done with this as-built plan was the scale had to be changed for this plan because DPW didn't like the scale they used in the original plan, and they did do that. So Meredith very appropriately asked me, I think today, or no, I asked her whether you wanted large copies of the plan. If you approve the plan, then I will order from DeSalle Burke a Mylar, and then you will have to sign that Mylar. And I think right now where you don't have a regular, you only have an assistant planner, I think maybe the board members are gonna have to sign it. But you can do that, you know, as you're able to. So the question from Meredith, though, was, do you have a letter from DPW or a letter from the building department, you know, whatever it is that you need at this point? And I have to admit, I wasn't sure, but then we sent out inquiries. So I have to say I really appreciate the response immediately today, because Walter White responded. He's our one of our interim building commissioners. He's off today, but nevertheless, he did respond and indicated that, yes, each house has an occupancy permit, and he personally was the one who did the inspections. So as far as the building department is concerned, this development is done from a building code and occupancy permit standpoint. Then the next question was to the DPW, and it's kind of a town engineer DPW question, and right now we have a DPW director, no town engineer, but she was the town engineer. So again, she was very nice to respond because she's out, she's ill, but she nevertheless did respond. She provided a letter to the board, and if you haven't had a chance to look at it, I can read it to you. It's one page. So, and she also said that she's looking for a grant of easement, which is correct. This is a private road, and like most of these developments these days, it's a private road, private drainage structures, private septic sewer line. But the town does not do private water lines. They want to control the entire water system. So they need to be able to get in. They had to approve the water line, it was installed by the contractor, but they need to be able to get in later to do maintenance. And we also have to be able to maintain the fire hydrant. And sometimes there's emergency access required. So what I did was to take the grant of easement that I had done for Wentworth Farm several years ago. It's a bigger development, but the same type of private and not private infrastructure. And I sent a draft back to Marina to review. She may not have reviewed it yet because we kind of crossed. I sent the easement, she sent the letter saying I'm going to be looking for that. I also sent her a copy of the Declaration of Trust, because the Declaration of Trust explains in detail that all the things Marina expressed concern about here are private. So the drainage system is private and all parts of the drainage system. The sewer lines are private. The road is private. The light is private. Those all have to be maintained by these 5 homeowners. And when we do get an as-built plan approved, I'd like to record this grant of easements before this happens, but the homeowners association is supposed to take over management, and then they will become responsible, for example, for plowing. So the developer is still doing the plowing. So of course he would really like to be able to hand it over, but it's, you have to, the grant of easement usually has to be reviewed by town council. Then it comes back to the town administrator, and at the next available meeting, I believe they still do it this way. The members of the select board have to approve it and then they sign it. But what I like to do is to have a document ready for signature. So if town council's approved it, then we provide that document, they sign it at their meeting, then I can take it and record it because I'll be able to get the grantor's signature ahead of time. So it appears to me that these sort of supporting elements are complete, and I managed to get a response surprisingly, the same day that you asked. The only question really, for me at least, is on the plan itself. Do you have any questions? And do you have that so that you can look at it on your laptop? Or, I'm sorry that I
Pull it
didn't.
up.
I asked, my
Do you wanna
original inquiry
Do you want
was,
to share it?
no, that's okay, unless, I will if you have a question. So,
So
what would you
regarding
like to
the
know?
easement, is that reflected on the plan?
No, the easement is recorded at the Registry of Deeds.
But it typically would not be on
No, I don't.
the plan that we
I
would be
suppose,
signing off on?
well, I could ask them to put, actually, I don't have it recorded yet, that's the problem.
Yeah.
If I get it recorded, and maybe that would make sense, let me make a note of that. I can have the engineer put a note on the plan,
That would be, I think that's
the
helpful.
grant of
and
easement.
Just
That's a good
whoever's
idea.
looking at that.
Just for the water,
plan
though,
later.
not for the gas or the
Well,
sewer.
it's to the recorded grant of easement, and then this is the grant of easement, which I'm supposed to pass out to you, but I didn't, so that you, just so you can see what it says. This is just a draft, hasn't been approved,
That's what grant of
but
easement.
there are 2 copies and 1 more, and I have one here.
I think,
Um,
yeah, I think I
so-
already have this.
When someone looks at the development plan and they
Right.
see the note about the grant of easement, they'll see the recording reference. They look it up, they read it, they know if they're buying from one of these first buyers, they know what the easement says.
Right.
And then there are, you know, the grant of easement actually references a number of other documents, like the subdivision plan, like the subdivision control approval decision. So once you read the grant of easement, then you go back, you're led back to
Right.
other documents that affect this development.
That's why it's important, I think, that it's
You're right,
reflected, just,
yeah. And I think
I was
that,
selling a house on that lot, and you wouldn't know about the easement, and then you'd have to go try to track it and find it, so.
so if you're satisfied generally with the as-built plan, I would not be returning with a Mylar until I have the engineer put that note on. And it might take a little while because I want to wait until I have a recording reference.
That would be great.
So I hope that the developer will be understanding of that, but we just have to do it that way.
Yeah, but it sounds like everything's just in great shape and ready to, and it's a great, glad that all the homes are sold, and it's a good project. There were also, it referenced in just the letter, along with minor updates and adjustments to the submitted as-built plan. Do you know what those minor updates were?
Let's
It's
see.
in the last,
Yeah.
second to last paragraph, last sentence. And is that anything that should also be reflected in the plan?
Well, I can tell you that until the minor updates and adjustments are explained and put on the plan, you're not going to get an as-built plan. You're not going to get a Mylar back to sign. So I just make a note, you should expect to see it, but it won't be probably for several weeks. No, I don't know what that is because I did see it, but I didn't want to call Marina at home since she's not feeling well. But I will be talking to her to find out what that is. But I'm also assuming that not Kyle Harnish, I think the engineer called her, to check on the status of this
Is it Sky?
December plan.
Yeah, from the engineering department?
I think they spoke directly to Marina, but they could have been
Okay.
talking to Sky as well.
Yeah, they
So
also-
we will find out. And you're right, I'll make it just a little check.
And we could- Didn't we get a letter from Sky?
Yeah, well, it was the same thing. It was just another email that I just wanted to forward any correspondence I had.
So
So
the
what-
question is, the plan that you're looking at is still subject to minor adjustments. So what I will tell you I will do is, once those adjustments are on it, then we have to get another signature anyway. So I'll send it for information purposes to all of you, and that will be before I come back to get a signature on the Mylar, and before I put the note with the grant of easement.
Yeah.
Let me just see if there's anything else that I didn't notice.
Everything else looked good.
Yeah, the notes about what remains privately owned, those are good comments to make. Those are reflected in the declaration of trust. And the grant of easement only allows the town to go in and maintain what it owns. And the only thing it owns is the water line, basically, and the fire hydrant.
That's great.
So I don't
Any
know
other
whether,
questions from
yeah. Do you, I'd rather not, so are you willing to take a vote that you're satisfied with the as-built plan, subject to the minor adjustments that are to be made, and then I don't have to come back for another vote from
Reference
you?
to the easement?
I'm fine with that.
I would be fine with that too.
Okay.
Is everyone okay with
Fine.
that? Okay.
So the actual vote is to accept the as-built plan, and that would be subject to the inclusion of the easement language and the minor adjustments referenced in the letter from Marina Fernandez, right? So that's my motion.
Second.
Any discussion?
Nope.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank
And I'll just review the notes in here, and if I think there should be more notes related to the approvals or anything like that,
Right.
it'll all be in there. So
Okay,
it's
great.
too small for me to read right now, but I'll make sure of that. So thank you very
That's
much.
great.
Thanks for
Good.
meeting with me tonight, and I have the way forward now, so that's helpful.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So on our agenda next, welcome. We have our public hearing continued on site plan approval for 0 Blue Hill Ave, parcel B, 7-5, continued from January 23rd. And welcome. If you just want to introduce yourself again for the public, that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris Fazenden with Viking Development. Here about Milton Avenue, 0 Blue Hill Ave.
Yeah.
I'll happily share my screen if Julia wants to promote me. And then all of our consultants are on the Zoom link, should be civil, architectural, and traffic.
Great. Julia, can you?
Yeah, it looks like she got
She's
me.
getting you on?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And again, thank you for submitting your materials
I know.
in advance.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Yeah,
that.
you've been great. We've all been complimenting you for just how it's very
Process has
helpful.
been helpful.
Okay. So, as that loads, there we go. Last time, the conclusion of our meeting, there was a comment that we were getting close, and that got me excited. So we went back and we looked at some of the comments and takeaways, looked at the details, and it does feel like we are getting to those last little things, so I'm excited about that. With that, I'll say that I would like to set a goal for myself and maybe for all of us to maybe look at maybe a motion for an approval on this by the end with discussions of the last comments and any remaining comments. If conditions need to be discussed, that's completely okay, and I'd be willing to have those conversations. Just looking back at all of this, we started in August. We started with pre-app and neighborhood meeting, and neighbors attended the first meeting, and now we're here. It's been 6 months of back and forth coordination, incorporating neighbor comments. I really think we've developed a plan here, childcare facility. I understand it's in the RA district, but it meets a lot of the regulations. I think it's a permissible project. 3 meetings ago, we went through a full redesign, shrunk our building down, added additional buffer space to abutters, increased our natural buffer to the right-of-way, moved our detention system underground, removed a significant amount of retaining wall, limited disturbance, earthwork quantities, tree removals. We've now been through a full peer review, 2 traffic counts. We've been through 3 reviews of a stormwater peer review. We're nearly complete on that. We've looked at building exterior, we looked at retaining wall materials, plant layouts, those materials, snow storage location, parking quantities. I think you guys get the hint. I understand, and this is a point I wanted to make to you guys. I think it was last meeting or maybe the meeting before. You guys made it clear you have a responsibility to the community to make sure everything's well planned, sustainable, beneficial to them. So I think that's where our cooperation has been, trying to make sure you guys are able to do that while keeping in mind, our brand, our prototype, trying to keep what the Gardner School is. So I'll run through the comments and takeaways page by page, plan by plan, show you exactly where everything was added. Feel free to ask any questions at that point and just kind of run through it that way.
Great.
So, Jim, you mentioned it right when we walked in. The first one is the window muttons.
Yep.
We had submitted this exhibit here as well as an updated elevation showing that revised design. It will go on all 4 sides of the building. I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at it, have any questions. I think it was a good improvement.
Well, I have a just, and Jim and I, because I always agree with you that I'm always looking to do more of a classic look with more mullions. In this case, because there are so many windows and they're so tall, the biggest thing I look for in a building is consistency of some kind. And it's almost like you have 2 different styles going on, which to me, it doesn't look like, it doesn't feel like a cohesive look. And when I actually, because it was nice to see this, and I'm glad this is Jim, was his suggestion, is that I think to keep it uniform, if you went with the 4/4 versus the original, I think that it might look really busy with all of that on all of the windows. So I think I'm actually in favor of what they originally had as window mullions. I think it goes with the architecture, but because I'm normally always, that's more of the look I like, but because there's so many, if there weren't so many windows, and I drove by the Goddard School today, and they do, they have like an 8/1, like they do, but it's broken up and they don't have nearly as many windows, and they're shorter and wider. With this, I feel like it could get really busy to do 4/4 on all of them. So, and I want to hear for the rest of the others, obviously, but I think originally seems a little more simple and a little bit more appropriate maybe with the style of architecture. But I would open it up to everybody's thoughts on that.
Can you easily bring up the original to compare?
Yes. Let's see here.
But I like that we're looking at both, so that's, I think it's.
Now the guess is, what meeting did we?
Do
I
architecture.
think it was last meeting.
I think it was last meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was really, we've had it this way for a while in terms of the 1 floor having it. So this is actually from 2 meetings ago.
It was 2 meetings, yeah, it was when the architect was, I think
He was
quite ill,
Yes,
that poor
he-
guy. Yeah,
So,
that was before,
see what I can't figure
that's
out
what we
is-
have now, so.
This is from December. This is from our January meeting. So the difference is these windows here, down in this lower level. That's what had changed, right? We've got 6 on the bottom, 8 on the top, 6 long here. So we had made this inset portion uniform, and then made the middle one thicker to give that double hung look. So I think
So that was what, let me see.
yeah, I think Jim's original question was more about making them look more like a double hung window. That's kind of what drove us to this change today.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that middle one we made thicker, and then uniformly, there's those, what would it be, 3 on the first floor here. And then the doors, we had added them. If I can find now where the original, yeah.
So I would say that given that you have window types that aren't double hung, thickening or widening that center mullion, to me, makes it
Maybe that's.
too different than the other windows. So where they all have the same thickness, then having a different pattern in them seems to make more sense. Because then if you make it look like a double hung, then you begin to question why they all aren't double hungs, I think. So I think the way it was previously, I agree with Meredith, that would be my preference. You know, I also am, given that I'm an architect, you know, the architect has his vision and design here, and he's not here to ask what his preference is, but
I think he is on Zoom. He can weigh in.
okay.
You like what he designed?
And
Chris,
sometimes-
Chris,
oh, sorry.
was this the original? I'm sorry, Maggie.
Yeah, no.
Was this the original? Was this the first elevation presented?
No. So
I feel like I remember.
I can go back further.
Just, I guess, for the sake of seeing what
That's
it's,
what I
how
was,
it started.
yeah, 'cause I
Right.
almost like what, I feel like.
Can everyone hear me?
You like to
This-
have options. You like to see the options.
Right. So if I share this one with you guys.
Josh has his hand raised. I think your architect might have his hand raised.
Can everyone
It
hear me?
does seem that his window type was aligned with his siding. You know, he had a different design where he has vertical siding. than-
Josh, would
than
you
he
like to
did.
add something?
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you.
All right, wonderful. Yeah, so going back to kind of the design on what would be those double hung windows. So the way we created it, and still using the same system we have now for the best performance, is that we are essentially using a traditional mullion as the wider section. So it would actually match the outside of the framing. Those internal ones are actually much, much thinner. So it is essentially a different character than what you would see typically. I would agree that I think doing the two separate designs how we are now is a little busy. I would prefer to stick with one idea over the other. I don't know at this point that I'm dead set on either one. If we enjoy the double hung look, we can certainly do that across the board. But I agree, I think as a whole, it would make more sense to keep continuity throughout all the windows.
What was the difference in what your very original plan was and what we're looking at?
Very original. So the original was twice the size in a single story, if that's what we're referring to.
Yeah.
But the windows were essentially the ones that are on the towers on the right and left. So
That's what I remember. Can we try to find that? Just to,
You want the single story one?
it would have to be the single
Yeah,
story,
okay.
but
And that's fine. I was just going back to when we transitioned to the 2-story. So floor plan and elevations. Let's see what we got.
Josh, while Chris is looking at that,
Yes.
I want to make sure I understand what you said. Are you saying that for all the windows, you would prefer same window everywhere?
in a sense, yes. So to create a little bit of proportion to this building, we do have different sizes in general. So the lower story is slightly smaller just because of the floor-to-floor ratio, and when you're standing there, they do not need to be as big to feel equal. So the second story is actually larger, but I think character-wise, it would make more sense to do the same design on both sizes, whether that's the double hung or what you're seeing here with the kind of lower and upper divider.
Yeah, and that also would be regardless of what the siding style and material is, right? Same window no matter
Correct.
what. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. What's the overall length of the building from far right corner to far left corner?
Let me see if I can pull it up.
It's not very long. I mean it's a relatively small building.
132 feet,
132.
and I think 68 feet deep.
Yeah.
Correct. It is 132 by 68.
If you think about 132 feet relative to, let's just say, an average home,
That's what I'm thinking.
it's a
Yeah.
lot wider than an average, longer or wider than an
Yeah.
average home.
Yeah.
So having these things where you're breaking down the scale into these what is it, like 5 volumes a little bit, and changing the material and the color and the, so for,
But still, you know, a colonial could be 30, right? The facade, about 30 feet, 32, 34, something like that?
yeah.
Yeah. So you were saying, I think I interrupted your train of thought, right?
Yeah, for me, the windows, I prefer to see continuity in style than differentiation in style on the windows, because there's not a lot of three-dimensional variation here. It's not like it's 20, 30 feet where you have kind of a different wing. You really have some articulation of a rectangular box. And so whether it's, if you look at that right now, that window is basically the same size, right to middle and left. And yet, you know, the mullion pattern is different. So the question then becomes why? And to me, sometimes if I'm looking at it, say, okay, I might do that if I had ganged the windows together, or if I had a wider window, but I have the same opening size, and now I have a different, you know, subdivision within it. It doesn't seem to me to have the logic that I might expect. And I'm not trying to be critical of Josh here, but I think he's saying he liked the idea of continuity, and I would say I agree with him on that.
I do too. I agree with you as well. I think, and you know, I mean, the reason I asked the question about the length of the building is it kind of leads into there's not a lot of distinction here. It's not a very, very large building, and I prefer continuity, you know, throughout, regardless of you know, the difference in size from top to bottom, or regardless of the different siding materials. I think continuity would be preferred.
And especially, I agree, and especially since the siding, you already have a difference in siding. So you have the horizontal gray, and then the middle, again, I don't have the language of an architect, but then you have the vertical in the middle, and then at the top you have the shingle side. So that's 3, you know, it's still sort of the same in planting. You plant in odd numbers. So you have 3 different elements there with the siding, 3 different sidings. So then I do think you need something that ties those 3 elements together. So I think I like the continuity.
Yeah, and since we're talking about continuity and we're talking about windows, I happen to prefer the 4/4. I think it has a schoolhouse kind of theme to it, for me anyway, but I'm maybe a little bit of too much of a traditionalist in that respect, and but that's my preference. So I would view continuity as a desirable aesthetic, but I could be open-minded in terms of style. Does Gardner have a position?
So my thought there would be looking at everything, looking at the doors. I think the doors would be hard to get that kind of too short, one long in the middle layout. I think we could go with that 4/4 look. I guess the doors would be 3-6 squares, but it would look the same. So I think we should make those N1s 4/4 and make it consistent that way.
I think that would be nice.
Okay.
Just to switch out those windows, just to be consistent.
Agreed.
Absolutely, I agree as well.
Which windows? Who has the cursor?
I do.
So can you just drag the cursor to where?
So these would be 4/4, and then these would become 4/4, and these would become 4/4, and that would make you consistent across the whole thing.
Okay, and in regard to the entry stays as it is.
This here.
The double doors, the side lights.
Yeah, so this could become, the 2 side ones could become 4/4, and then the door, we're leaving the door as it is just because of signage, hours of operation,
Sure.
addressing. It gets really busy.
How do you guys all feel? Do you?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
That's fine.
And then the other doors remain 6 light?
Correct.
Yeah,
I wouldn't
I
change
like that too. I
With
wouldn't
the-
either.
The light above the top, it kind of
Yeah.
gives the 8. And then we would carry that across all sides. So these would get them as well.
4 over 4.
Correct.
What do you think, Cheryl?
Yeah, I think that's a good move.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, if we could
We
just
can
do
We can do that.
that revision, you can send it out, we can give you feedback, because that was,
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're, honestly, I think if we're good otherwise tonight, I think we could just have those follow.
Yeah.
Those revised elevations follow.
I agree.
yeah.
A closure.
That's fine.
Actually, I would, yeah, because we can't accept documents after we close the public hearing.
So
Isn't that right, Marion? Yeah. Well, we can have you, I think, come in by Zoom. Like if we say that the last remaining document that we have to bring in is a revised elevation.
yeah, and
You know-
if there's things like this, hearing, I don't know if I could get it next week. It sounds like your schedule is crazy, but that's a simple change that I could have to you in
Right.
a week. So I'm okay. I can't. I'd like to work towards not having to wait till a month from now
Right.
to finalize this.
Yeah.
And I think if this is the last remaining document that would need to come in, then I would think we could do that on the 20th next week.
Is there a
and-
situation where you could write a condition on all windows being 4 over 4 or something like that, or prior to building permit issuance, something
We
in that
also
path?
have, we do have, just not to,
I think I'm going to say the same thing as you.
the stormwater.
Oh, no. We have a meeting next Thursday. And
Yeah, and if you guys are willing to consider that for us, that's fine.
would you be okay with that?
So I just wanted to, because it sounds like the stormwater had some revisions, but did that get peer reviewed? It sounded
Yeah,
like
so we
that was not.
received comments this morning. Bowler's on, they can speak to the minor items that are left. That is one of those items
We
where
would need to have that as the
maybe
approval.
it's,
Maybe a suggestion, Chris, why don't we get through everything, and then we talk about,
yeah, sure.
when we have all of our issues, and then we
But
discuss.
But we want to
them.
try to get you, yeah.
I appreciate you guys working with us.
Can I ask a question while we're on that elevation? At the top of, it looks like at the top of your towers, what is that round element? Can you blow that up? What's your intention there?
Yeah, so it would be our logo medallion, depending on signage ordinance and what would be allowed. Trying to find a plan just to show you what our logo.
Chris, I believe he was referencing the portals.
Yeah. So, well, above our letter signage, we typically put a logo like this in a black and gold aluminum painted.
That's sort of what the Goddard School did. They have that sort of a circular logo.
And it seems like you have a number of them on the building. Is that really the intention, to have?
Yeah,
several of
for
them?
branding purposes, we like to put them on each of the gables that are visible. So I think as a starting point, it kind of ends up in all gables. But certainly you can see on this elevation
What's
here,
on all?
they're not shown.
Yeah, you see on the front,
Great.
it's,
Oh, I didn't realize,
Yeah, so these guys here.
I noticed the one in the middle, but
Yeah. And we're open to it. In any signage committee review that we go through, you have a certain amount of square footage and all of that, so you end up in areas, maybe that center one, because it's so tall, you would put one there. Maybe you only put them on the front 3, not on the other north, south, and west elevations.
is that representative of the size?
Josh, do you know if those are drawn 30 inches, 36 inches?
I believe they are looking at this.
So that's the scale, yeah. It's, I don't know, my own point of view, it's a little unusual to see 3 of the same sign across the front of any building, but,
So one good thing is that that's not facing the road, correct?
This is.
that is,
This is facing the
Yeah.
road, so,
So that's all the other sides, I'd have absolutely no issue taking them off. It's limited
yeah, I think I would
visibility.
prefer to see one over the middle, but not on the 2 sides.
what do you think, Cheryl?
Because it's sort of a busy logo.
Yeah, I kind of also, you have the words, the Gardner School, below the logo saying the Gardner School. What do you think about having the logo on the 2 ends and not on the center above the words?
And if it's black and gold, that is more preferable than
It's black and gold.
all
It's
your
black and gold. It goes with the color scheme
multicolored,
of the
yeah,
building.
then your multicolored.
So,
That's historically.
question for you guys. Does signage fall into what we would discuss here, or is there a separate process for it? I just don't want to discuss and
It
commit
can-
here and then go to
yes.
someone else and
Yeah, we do tend to touch on signage and talk about signage if we,
We don't get into the details of the design, but the general location and sizes,
Sure.
we do.
okay.
Yeah.
I just would hate to,
Materials,
yeah.
go in this direction, show up, and they're like, wait, but
Exactly.
they already told you what to do.
right, no, this would
Yeah.
follow, but they would sign off on the
But
final.
even on a special permit, I don't, because
it
I
goes
don't go
through
to the
that.
sign review.
It's a different committee, right?
It changed since you did your signage.
Oh.
It's now a sign review committee.
Okay,
It used to be the select board, it's gone through different
yeah.
iterations, so it is
Even
now.
under a special permit?
You still have to
It
go.
depends.
I think
No, this
like
is site, this is
illumination,
site plan approval.
illumination would trigger selectmen or select board. There's, as far as I've done research on. We had talked a little bit about the monument sign last week, and I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure that
Yeah,
it
that was
wasn't
exactly.
crossing. So that, I have no issue there. If we like them on the two ends and not above Gardner, or Gardner with it because of that taller gable, I think our preference would be to have as many of them on this front facade as we can, just as a brand element. I can show you a picture.
I honestly and definitely don't like 3 across the front. You know, I mean, maybe what you suggested, Cheryl, 1 on each of the ends and just the Gardner School in the middle,
fine.
or the Gardner School in the middle with just 1 above it, but not 3.
Let's take the one out of the middle. I'll approach it that way. Maybe we stack the on top of Gardner to fill the space a little bit more.
That's
We've
what I was
done
gonna
that.
say, that leaves that sort of empty, so that would be, yeah.
Yeah, I think you could look at the scale of those, the size of those letters in the center.
Yeah, this is a bigger,
Yeah,
plate for signage than
Right.
we've had in the past.
yeah.
So that would, yeah. Be good. Okay, and I just had another follow-up question to architecture, and we had talked about the type of materials for the retaining wall as
Yeah.
you come in. Did you settle on a certain?
So that's actually my next item.
Oh.
I've settled on, in my response to you guys, I had said I'm open to either option that we've proposed for that stone veneer for that wall along the entry drive. My preference would be, and maybe this is handled in the approval or the conditions, what might be, I don't want to stick to one product over the other at this point, just because of cost, lead times, all of those things. I want to get the retaining wall to design it, figure out which of those products they like to work with better, all of that. But I have no problem working with one of those products. I just
One of
don't
the
want to.
Conigliaro
Yeah,
products?
Conigliaro or the natural stone wall solutions.
I like that one better.
So I don't, if we want to specify one brand over the other, I'm okay there. But in terms of like the block, we'll match the color and nature of our stone along the base of the building. I just don't want to get all the way
Do you
down to
have a
one
sample,
block.
Jim, of the other?
So Pine Gardens used it actually, on Pleasant Street. If you look at those 2 stone walls, those are pre-manufactured, and they're beautiful.
Well, in their response, I like your response. I agree with you that you shouldn't stick to any particular brand.
Right.
Because it might go out of business, might change. So I'm okay with not having a brand, but I do like how you said it is with natural stone finish that complements the other natural elements. So I think that language is probably sufficient.
Yeah, so what I would suggest is on the elevation, if you can have like a photograph of the stone, so that when we'll have kind of the color and texture idea of it. And so when you go to get your final, you remember how we had a question come up with the Goddard School of the siding, and
Yeah.
we went out to the site and looked at the stone and everything. I'm just trying to make it clear, Marion's there, as clear as possible, so we don't have any sort of questions come up during construction. And that's not what we thought when we said these 2 options, so.
Sure.
It doesn't have to be on the drawing, it could be a separate attachment, but
Yeah, and
it's
that's-
something which shows the coloration, size, kind of the
that would-
texture of it.
That'll be another quick and easy thing for us.
Yeah.
I had submitted one of, when he had originally brought up natural stone wall, I had sent something in.
Yeah. And I know this is getting picky, but since you're going with kind of black and white, would the stone sort of be like grays, not in the browns, but,
My intent would be to pick something as close to this
Yeah,
material
okay.
going at the
Yeah.
base of the building.
yep,
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Natural.
yep.
Okay.
Very good.
Next item on my list was the cobblestone access drive. We had talked about that. I went and spoke to the traffic engineer, touched base with the civil engineer. In that response, I kind of outlined some safety concerns as well as DOT is just not a standard pavement type. We are comfortable putting the granite curb in, adding some aesthetic to the entry of that. I just don't feel comfortable putting that in for snow removal sliding as you approach 138.
And I did speak to two commercial snow plow drivers, and they agreed with you.
Okay. I'll be honest, it wasn't the first thing I thought of, but when traffic brought it up, it made sense. Oh, there was an issue or a comment brought up last time about snow storage. I'll just point out what we're talking about there. In this area here, the grading has a steep 3-to-1 slope. So I had Bowler kind of adjust the grading there, create a little bit more of a flat space, designated kind of a snow storage area there in this hatch that kind of captures the parking lot.
That's an improvement.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
they graded it a little better, so a portion, in low flows will drain to the parking lot and through the system. And then we've confirmed that if anything goes south, it'll be maintained in that swale and on our property.
And what's that surface going to be, Chris?
That should be a seeded material.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
Let me get back to the site plan. Next one, just to point out, we talked about a guardrail on the eastern parking there above the slope. I think that was a good one for us to catch from a safety perspective for parents and kids. We had that drawn in here along the curb line.
And that's wood,
Correct.
and that's called out as such?
Yes, proposed wood guardrail
Okay,
here.
great, thanks.
We've put that in a couple schools. It looks very good. Shrubs at our culvert under our entry drive. We just wanted to add a little bit of visual barrier from the roadway so you didn't see the rock riprap at the bottom of the swale there. So we've kind of enhanced the planting here. I believe we even pulled it south a little bit. As a reminder, there's also a topo change there. So 3 or 4 feet of a vertical buffer as well.
And it's a good selection of plants. It's a collection of deciduous as well as evergreens. And I think with the crab apples are a little bit shorter as your visual goes up to the maples, which are taller. So I think that's a good mix.
Chris, can I just go backward for a minute, just for clarity? That guardrail is 100% wood, so it's wood horizontals on wood posts.
Correct.
It's not wood on steel posts.
Wood post, wood rail.
Great.
Yep.
Good question.
Planting on the east edge, big focus on us trying to make that non-linear, so we added some depth kind of up and down the slope here. We had also talked about getting a tree in this landscape island here. Because of the underground detention, I can't actually get it in the island, but we got it right on that edge there. Actually, in some of these changes, guardrail included, we had to shift the underground pond or underground system a few feet to the west. Shade trees, I think we got 3 more shade trees into the parking lot area, a couple on the south.
Yeah, much better, I'd say.
Yeah, that's great. Nice.
Took out 2 parking spaces, made the parking lot symmetrical there in that bottom corner. Exterior lighting, we did a little bit of research on this one just to try and see what really made the most sense. What we determined was the north, south, and west sides are fully enclosed by gates. And so the timer of those building lights will be on the standard timer, which is off an hour after close. I'm not sure why this sheet's not loading. There we go. So north, south, and playground side west, those will just be normal hours. off an hour after close, on an hour before close. The main entry facade, any lighting there, and parking lot will go to a motion sensor an hour after operation. So 7 p.m. those would go to a motion sensor, with the intent being at a dimmed level when triggered. Something we haven't talked about that I thought also played into this was when the parking lot used to be behind the building, we were concerned about questionable activity. So I think that helps also from a security perspective. Gooseneck downlight on the monument sign, we kind of talked about signage there. I don't have any problem looking at an option there. I think we would ultimately look to pursue maybe an illumination on that main Gardner School sign. But I have no problem looking at some sort of lighting on that monument sign to match that. Construction management plan, Bowler had pulled something together. Cheyenne had shared with us the Milton Memory Care one. I think they dove into construction hours. They may have even put a traffic haul route plan together, discussed dust control and a few other things. I'm not sure if you guys had a chance to look at it, if you have any questions.
Can we talk about that for a few minutes?
Yeah, that's,
They did a good job, Chris. I thought they did a real good job. I just had a couple things I'd like to mention and ask the board members to weigh in. I think something that I'd like to make sure becomes, a requirement is that prior to the start of work, there's a coordination/review meeting with the police and your builder, whoever the builder ends up being. And that's if the police choose, but I think it should be offered. So the police and the building department, if they so choose, at the time that the contractor finalizes the construction management plan. Because the reality of it is that someone's going to take this at some point and they're going to fine tune it. And I'd like to make sure that there's a meeting that occurs so that you get concurrence from the town officials that they're okay with whatever the final construction management plan is.
Okay.
Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of permit requirement items that'll do that. I don't know if police gets triggered in that fashion, right? But public works, engineering, they would all be out there.
They make note throughout this of their intention not to affect traffic. They make note of not causing queuing, out on the roadway, or not having queuing out on the roadway. They make note of using police details to make sure. So I think it would make good sense that the police department have a chance, to meet, since the public roadway is their responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have no problem with that. I read the police detail part too, and figured there was going to be some sort of coordination, and it makes sense not to make the first time be a problem, and that's why they're doing it. We'll coordinate with them ahead of time.
Yeah, again, it's we've asked this in the past. I believe we asked this on the memory care clinic, that there'd be a point in time where that builder, whoever it is, because at this stage you cannot submit a construction management plan that's not going to change. There'll be some changes.
Yeah.
That was one. And something else that I think is really beneficial, and I'm not sure how this happens, but whoever you choose to build this will have, in the industry, we call it a short interval schedule. So a 2-week schedule, or most of us now use a 3-week schedule. And at least for the residents that live nearby, if that 2-week or 3-week look-ahead schedule is available somehow for them to be able to just understand what's happening. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure how we make that available within the town. Like, I don't even know if there's a portal where large projects have that kind of information. So any resident, somebody who's nearby, could say, okay, I'd just like to understand what's going on the next 2 or 3 weeks. Click on the website. They got a big earthwork activity. At least they're forewarned. And the town has less problems. The town then has less issues with people calling the building department saying, hey, what's going on over there? The information's out there. The residents can understand it. I think it's just managing expectations. That'll probably save you some heartache too, and the builder.
Sure.
So I don't know how to effectuate that. I just think it's a good idea.
Completely, other than the communication aspect of it and how we get it out to them, we have weekly meetings with the contractor to get updates, so that schedule is constantly there.
You're going to have it.
Exactly.
You
So
want
it's just a matter of how we get that shared with them.
Yeah, and I don't want it to be a burden for any town officials. I just would like it to be available so that any resident could see it. So I don't know if you can help figure out how to do that, that'd be great.
Yeah, well, I'll brainstorm and talk with the contractor. Most likely who builds this has built our other ones, and we can work something out there.
Do you have like a new projects link to your website where you could put this project up?
Yeah, we would have like a coming soon with a rendering or something.
Maybe
like
a
that.
drop-down box or something under that where you just click on the new Milton project in the schedule?
Possibly.
We don't have to solve it here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
right.
But
I'm
yeah,
worried about
there's-
sharing too much information, getting too far out ahead of us, what comes
Exactly,
with public information, but
But it might be easier for you to be in control of the information
That's where I'm going with
than
it.
having
Exactly.
town officials be in control of the information.
Well, it might be, what we used to receive, like when Walcott Woods was going on, there was just a periodic, just sort of, this is where we are right now, this is our next phase, or this is what we're doing right now. So it wasn't even weekly, it was, maybe a month in advance. But it could be distributed to the DPW, to, the engineering department, the DPW.
It was distributed to the neighbors too.
It was also distributed to the neighbors. So it was a really nice thing. So
I have an abutters list from the neighborhood
Yeah.
meeting, so we could.
butters and CC, DPW and.
But DPW, engineering, whoever else is involved there is probably out there on a
Right, exactly.
pretty regular
yeah.
basis.
On the department.
But I think that's a good approach. I think as long as I have emails, I could probably
It was
get
really nice to be able to get those.
It was
We'll
like,
send
it
mailers
was a
out.
look ahead, probably like a 3-week look ahead probably. And then I found them to be helpful. So that if we did hear from neighbors, we were familiar with where things were, what the progress was.
Sure.
And the neighbors appreciated it. I think they knew what was going on.
Yeah, I have no problem with that. That would likely fall on me, and I would take that on.
Yeah, and
You'll have less heartache if you do it.
What's that?
You'll have less heartache
Yes,
if you do
yes.
it. Yeah, okay. Construction hours, I just want to make sure, what they've written is that the hours of site and exterior construction shall be 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. And I'm not sure, I'm not sure that there's a distinction between exterior and interior, but that's something for you to comply with
Yeah.
the building department requirements. But also, I want to make sure that we note, if your construction activities are starting at 7 a.m., most construction sites have arrivals earlier than that. So, many are coming to life at 6 o'clock. People, if you're going to be working at 7, you can't arrive at 7, right? So, just add some. I think you should just add some clarity that arrivals,
Sure.
could be as early as 6 o'clock in the morning. And the other thing that I'd caution you on, under your parking of construction equipment, consider that site equipment, oftentimes, if they're going to work at 7, they're trying to start up their equipment earlier, certainly in the wintertime, and I don't think that's allowed. You know what I mean? I just want to be careful that we don't have equipment starting at 6:30 and running from 6:30 to 7 so that they can be operating at 7. Just make sure that the startup time of equipment is not earlier than 7 o'clock in the morning.
And also really, deliveries shouldn't start until 7 because if there's no one there to take the delivery, then you're going to have idling. And if you have a big vehicle, it's not a roadway that you want idling during morning rush or any rush hour time. So
The activities prior to 7 should only be passenger vehicle activity arriving on the site. You know what I mean? Not.
So contractor parking and things like that.
Yeah.
And you also note in here, and I'm just, for some reason I'm questioning this, you have Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. And again, that distinction, you have to sort out exterior, interior. I'm not sure that you have the availability. I'm not sure they have the opportunity to work interior after a certain hour. But you also have 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturday. I don't think it's allowed at 7 a.m. on
I
Saturday.
thought it was, I was going to say the same thing. I thought it was 8 a.m. on Saturdays.
It's 9.
9.
It's 9?
9 on Saturday.
So just check the hours. Those are established hours, Chris.
It's 9, okay.
And I only have one other item. Your construction worker parking, you indicate that all your parking will be on-site, and that's to be expected. But I think you should just consider the fact that you may have some activities that won't allow you to be parking on-site, and just clarify that now. Certainly when you're paving, there'll be nobody parking on-site. They'll be off-site somewhere. So I'm not saying you can't park off-site. I think you should just note that, for all of the project, you will park on-site, except for maybe some distinct activities that force you to not be able to park on-site. I don't want you to write a plan that you can't comply with. Do you know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
So you may as well recognize now.
Except for select activities.
Yeah, and those should be identified well in advance.
Sure.
Just so the
3 weeks
neighbors,
ahead,
yeah. That's all I had.
Okay, yeah, we can look at that. Just a couple more. Ornamental fence material, we had talked about that a little bit last time. I sent that back in. Request for no disturb buffer area, right away and property lines. We added a couple notes just to clarify that the limit of disturbance is just that and kind of what we're approving. So we need the contractor to maintain that. I had Boulder kind of put some notes in here. No disturbance beyond limit of work. I believe somewhere there may even be a note in one of these that kind of clarifies that as well.
And what will you be putting up for the no disturb to prevent? Is that like,
Julia, is Andy or Luke on?
I'm not seeing them.
Okay.
Oh, wait, there's Luke, hang on.
I believe we had discussed some sort of a construction fence.
yeah, just something that's, inevitably somebody will say, oh, I didn't know that was the no buffer
Right,
zone until.
right.
Hi, Chris.
So Luke, did we put something in the plans about how we were gonna delineate the limit of disturbance?
Absolutely. For the record, Luke DiStefano and Bowler. On the construction management plan, we specifically called out a 6-foot-high construction fence that would basically delineate the limit of work line.
Perimeter protection under that, a secure 8, great. Great, it's in there. Okay, I just
Okay.
wanted to
Okay.
double check.
And then the last item I had, thank you, Luke, was shade around the playground. We did do a little bit of revised grading, adjusted a little bit of the planting area there, got 4 additional shade trees, kind of on the south and west areas there. And then I submitted the shade structure for what the playground typically has and should have here. So with that was everything we had talked about last time. Like I said, I think we've really gotten to a good place with this. Something I didn't say earlier that I meant to is I do feel like all of us, neighbors, board, design consultants, this is probably the most effective and efficient school we've put together. Gardner School has put together.
All right.
I was going to ask for a review
Yeah.
of us. Take a customer survey at the end.
One question on the guardrail. Sorry.
That's all right.
Is that painted or is that left natural?
Natural. And
Good
we'll
enough.
typically make sure it's sanded down just because we've been talking lately about kids like to run their hands on things. So we'll make sure it's got a smooth finish. Cool.
I had a conversation with one of our members, and we both agreed that you have made the process easier for us too. Not to take away at all from any of the attorneys that represent clients. It does make a difference when the client's sitting at the table and can actually have the discussion and negotiate, solutions.
Sure.
While we sit here. And that I think has been really helpful because we've solved some of the concerns, at the table with you. We don't always have that opportunity. Yeah. And it's likely because the legal representative doesn't always have that opportunity.
Right.
Not because they don't want to, but having you here, having Josh available, having Bowler available, it makes a difference. So
I appreciate that. And I don't think it really saves anybody time if we just stand here with legal people and have that conversation. We end at the same place.
Let's be careful. We have great respect for the legal people that are here with us. Great respect. Yeah.
So I guess then the only other thing that we're waiting for, which I just was going to touch on, is a final letter, the peer review, following up there were a few outstanding items that you
Yeah.
were addressing. Do you want to just talk about that for a minute? Where
Luke,
that-
do you want to talk about those remaining items? Do you think there's a path here where we can get those wrapped up, worked out with Horsley Witten in the next week?
That's the only.
Chris, did you ask me that?
Yeah. I spoke briefly with Andy earlier about the comments.
Yeah, no, Andy and I discussed it, and really the remaining Horsley Witten comments are, they're very technical, nothing that we have any issue with complying with. They're all just, add a note here, revise a detail type thing. So we would recommend, if the board saw fit, that these would all be resolved, prior to the issuance of the building permit as a condition of the approval, because again, there's nothing in the final letter from them that is any real concern to us.
All right, I would, yeah.
So it sounds like we have a few, couple of documents to come back to us. So it seems as if we need to continue the public hearings to be able to accept those documents. But I don't see myself having any outstanding issues or comments after that. It'll be just a matter of receipt.
Right.
So that I think we could close the public hearing next week if we get those documents in.
Okay. Yeah, we'll
But
work on the
that's-
windows, the stone.
I don't know if everybody agrees with
construction
me on that,
management.
but
I agree with you, Cheryl. Yeah.
Okay. And then the order of conditions, do you have somebody who's going to be preparing? Or is that?
You mean the decision?
Decision and with the order of conditions. Do you typically?
No,
have
typically in the
somebody?
past, the town is prepared.
Okay. Which we could use.
I think we could probably use the Gardner School as a template. Don't
That's
look at me.
No, I think we should.
It's just what you wanted. We now get to write a decision.
No, we're short-staffed. So what I was going to suggest is we do
We have 4
have.
people here.
No, we have the
Got an
Gardner.
applicant
Jim,
here.
want to take a stab at it?
I'll take a stab, might not get done by next week.
What I was going to have, when Cheyenne is feeling better, and if she's watching, having her pull up what our approval decision was for the Gardner School.
And we also have the one from,
Sorry, what's?
You're using Goddard.
I'm sorry, the Goddard School.
happens all
I'm
the
sorry,
time.
they're so similar. The Goddard School.
the other school, though, that was on Blue Hill Ave also.
Little
was on-
Sprouts.
Little Sprouts. I think looking at both of those, I think
even
Ned Corcoran
yeah.
probably drafted the one, and Marion, you probably drafted the one. So those would be good sample base. So, Sean,
So.
Shouldn't we be having a lawyer do this at this point?
Well, they
this
probably
is-
have an
Well,
attorney.
Cheyenne.
What's that?
I was going to say
They
Cheyenne.
probably have an attorney.
Yeah.
Do you have somebody that can draft it?
I guess I can. I typically don't, only because the towns have had a pretty boilerplate method for how they do it.
so I would think,
Right, this would be my 5th or 6th
So this-
project, and I've never been asked to draft it myself.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, we have some attorneys who typically come in with just, we ultimately will end up writing or amending,
right,
but
because
just a
there's
template.
the summary at the beginning and all that stuff, minutes, and which typically comes from your side.
Right.
And then we would just make sure that we're in agreement with the conditions,
So
which
what-
I would do next week.
what I would ask from you is at least a list of all the documents that you think are the final documents.
Okay.
And then the dates. And so we normally have that they were submitted, let's say it was August and it was amended 4 times. You would have the original date, the list of the sheets, and then each amendment date on it. So that gets, so if you would at least put that together.
You know what, I'll have, when Cheyenne, Julia, what we should do is similar to what we did with the construction management plan. We sent you a sample of what we look for in
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
So we can send you what our approved site plan approval for those 2 preschools, and you can see the documents that were, and how it was formatted and what we would need to put into our decision.
Okay, yeah, because I have them here, and there's no list of documents from what I can tell.
Marion, there should be a list of documents, right?
Usually when I write a decision, I do. I can't speak for what's in Goddard, I
Yeah.
have to go back and look. Yeah. It-
Or
it
we
should
have
happen.
recommendations for attorneys.
Yeah. And I have no problem with doing that. That would help everybody to know exactly what's being approved, what's the latest, what's the date on that document, all of that. So I can pull together that list, no problem.
And it's helpful if somebody has a question when construction is underway,
Yeah.
and is that really what got approved? And then at least it's easy to identify the documents.
Okay. With dates, and then we also want to track the amendments.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because the site plans, those have been amended a few times.
So what I was thinking is, I was thinking of having Cheyenne draft it, put it together. I think and then running it by town council. I think we definitely need an attorney's
Absolutely.
looking it over.
And if Chris
before
can
we-
supply the list of documents,
Yeah,
I think at least then we can compare that to what he thinks are his final documents. Because,
exactly.
honestly, the way we have the electronically all the documents, they come in a folder for a particular meeting. And so, you probably have the best tracking system for what you think are the most current documents.
Yeah.
And then we can make sure that that's consistent with what we have and think.
Sure. Do you want me to include fence, shop drawings, all of that, cut sheets? Okay.
Everything.
Yep. And then I'll add on that list at the end, whatever documents are being updated for next time.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
That's great. So
All right, so are we ready to continue the hearing?
continue the hearing to February 20th.
So I'll make a motion to continue the public hearing for site plan approval for 0 Blue Hill Ave, parcel B-7-5, to February 20th at 7:05.
Yep.
Second.
All right. So Julia, we'll add that to the,
Do we vote?
oh, sorry. Yeah,
Yeah.
Just for clarity, that's a Zoom meeting. That's not an in-person meeting.
it is a Zoom meeting.
So
Oh,
for
right.
Chris.
it
So
is Zoom
we
meeting.
we were scheduling it as a Zoom?
Easier on me.
Is that-
I
okay.
appreciate you
So
clarifying.
tell you,
Yeah, it is. Yeah, good, good.
you're not sitting here alone.
Zoom you from here.
Yeah, so we'll be on Zoom. Okay, so there's a motion. Is there a second?
Already
Is there a
second?
Sorry. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
See you next week. Thanks.
You all.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Josh.
Josh.
Luke. Okay. All right, so moving on. Julia, do you want to this is the discussion of the util budget.
Okay.
Did you have any information on that?
Well,
Cheyenne's
the
not here.
discussion is just basically to decide how much you want to spend, because that PO has been tacked out.
So one of the things that I recall is that we had grant money that had restrictions, and it had to be used for compliant zoning. And then we had planning board funds. So when you say the contract, do you know, Julia, if that's how that contract is, the fee was allocated? Does that mean they're out of the grant funding part of the contract, or just?
Cheyenne didn't mention specific.
Because, I don't recall how much we had left in our fiscal year funding.
We have, yeah, because she did go through, and I think Julia, was that in the budget you gave me, or is that for future budget?
Yeah,
I haven't looked
in
at
the
it.
budget that I gave you. The util PO, like the last bill that we got from util, we had to draw from our miscellaneous budget to pay half of it because we didn't have enough.
From which
Util.
budget, Julia?
I'm sorry, what?
You said you had to draw from which budget?
We had to draw from the 50,000 planning
Right.
board.
Right, and how much did
Study.
you have to draw from that?
I think it was 4,000.
Yeah, it was a small amount.
Okay.
So here's the 50, yeah. So as of at the beginning of January, we pretty much had our whole we hadn't spent any money yet from our budget. So we've just dipped into it just a little bit. So we do have significant funding to finish that, but
But they need a contract extension.
But they need a contract extension. So I almost feel like we should wait. I would like to discuss that when Cheyenne.
Do you think we can discuss that next week and maybe
Yeah.
have a recirculation of that? I know we all discussed and approved the contract,
Yeah.
but if we're going to extend it, we should see if there's any modifications we want to make to it.
Yeah.
So, and I think we should not wait until a month from now for that. So I'd like
Yeah.
to have that be discussed next week.
I agree. I
Okay.
think so. Yeah.
So you're gonna put this on the agenda for the 20th?
Yeah. Why don't we, just so we can?
And their contract, not just their budget, but their contract.
Okay.
So it would be the same line item, discussion of util budget / contract.
Okay.
Great.
And are you, when you're ready to go to the next?
Yep. All right. So that's good. All right. Are we ready? So the next item we have is the MBTA community zoning discussion. So this I put on because I want it. Just it should always be on there because there's always going to be until we are fully compliant have this on. So the zoning discussion. So obviously there's a select board meeting tomorrow morning, which will give us more clear direction, I would say, and what the select board's approach will be. What we know right now is we're still in the comment period with the regulations. We know that the law is legal and enforceable by the AG. The regulation period, just for those who are watching, there's an open comment period. I think the select board's talking about what comments they would like to submit. That comment period is up on the 21st of February. So then the comment period will be closed, and then we'll await the final regulations. So then we have a time frame, which Cheryl, when you filled out and submitted, and I appreciate you're doing that, a draft action plan. When the planning board met, we agreed with all the time frame of all the dates that we were scheduled to make sure that we have compliant zoning by July 14th, before that deadline.
Are we going to submit comments to the select? I know the selectmen are.
I would like to talk about the comments too, but
Yeah.
can I just say that I'm still in the dark a little bit about the meeting because I couldn't find a recording and there's no minutes yet. So
Did you see the draft?
I saw what Cheyenne sent after,
Okay.
but I haven't had the benefit of knowing what the discussion was, and so I wouldn't mind a recap, just so I'm not in the dark.
Yeah,
I had hoped to be able
absolutely.
to
I know,
watch
and
the meeting on Milton Access TV, but I haven't been able to locate it. So, and I asked Cheyenne if she could send a link, and so I don't know, maybe it's available now. Last I checked was yesterday, but I do think the comment, it ends on the 21st. We have an opportunity to comment. I do think beyond what I think you discussed, which was rapid transit aspect of the guidelines. There are other aspects of the guidelines that I think we should comment on. So I understand that you took a vote and you sent to the select board an action plan with an appendix that largely reflects what Mr. Doherty submitted, which is stating that we don't believe that we're rapid transit, or we don't even believe that we're adjacent, and that the commuter rail capacity is only dictated by the 15 units an acre. But I don't think that's really been thought through very well, what that exactly means in terms of districts. We haven't really looked at what does 15 acres look like within a half a mile of the commuter rail stations. And so I think the public needs to start hearing about that. And I think they need to hear about it soon, just like the two speakers who spoke earlier. I do think that we've done some work on the rapid transit piece, and I think we probably are pretty close to having something to take to the public and get their feedback on. But I don't think we're anywhere close on something else, whether it's 10%, whether it's 15%, or whether it's something that's really 5 or 6%. And I don't think that we have the luxury of waiting a month to start talking about that, honestly.
So the question is, will we, well, first of all, just to recap, just real highlight an overview. So we started the meeting going through your draft first. I wanted to make sure everyone went through everything that you had put in, because I thought you put in some very good language, some of the housing initiatives that we're going through right now. I think we went to where we had been in our last time when we met and we were discussing the action plan, where we were on that draft. We sort of synthesized some of what you had in there with your language, but the reason why I think we ultimately decided not, and the board can also weigh in on this, that we decided not to, at this time, take a position on where, what type of community we are, is because we don't know, the regulations are still in the comment period and we don't have final regulations. We have emergency regulations, but those might not necessarily be the regulations that whatever zoning we put forth in July, that those are the regulations. So the regulations could change. There was also the fact that there was a meeting, and you might not have known this either, because I found out like last minute, that our Representative Wells and Bill Driscoll were going to be meeting with the HLC, with the head at Augustus. So they met the day after we were meeting, and they were going to go in and talk to them about the fact that, because rapid transit is in the regulations. So what we were saying is, what we know right now is what is in the statute. And the statute language very explicitly says subway. It doesn't say any extensions. That was HLC adding that language into their regulations. But so we wrote something based on the fact that what we have is, right now, the regulations are not legal and enforceable. There's emergency regulations, but what we know is what's in the statute. So we wrote, and that's why we didn't want to just randomly pick a category. I think the majority of the board feels we should be, if we are going to follow what is in the regulations, and the regulations are properly promulgated and finalized, that we would be an adjacent community simply by the fact that we do not have a subway in Milton. Our trolley is, by definition, is not a subway. I think, Sean, you even read off what the definitions were. So that's where we were coming in. We were saying, and we were trying to express that we intend to be fully compliant, with the law, and then, depending on where the regulations fall.
So as far as I understand, the emergency regulations are legal and are in effect. So to
For
say
90 days.
To say that that we don't have anything, I think is not quite correct. And then yes, within 90 days we'll have regulations, and we don't know that they're going to find us not to be rapid transit. And then the question is, do we accept that as a town? And
if we,
and as a board, we said our responsibility was to prepare zoning that would be compliant with rapid transit and would be compliant with adjacent community. And what you submitted was not even adjacent community in what you suggested.
It was based on the statute.
So now we're talking about a third option. And there's no criteria for that option. There's nothing in the guidelines for that option, nor is there really for adjacent community, because HLC hasn't defined us as that. So
we're now at a period where the select board is making some determination tomorrow. And they've also opened a door for the discussions with HLC. HLC has said that they would be open to a conversation with Milton on looking at a possible adjacent community. I don't know where that discussion will go, but I was, you know, I think we're going to know a lot more within the next week or two.
So, you know, I think you both were at the meeting the other night, as I was.
Right.
And Chair Wells said they still said that we're considered rapid transit. So, you know, I think it's not going to be something that is going to be decided at this table. So we need to decide how we're going to advance zoning.
Right.
And we need UTIL's assistance. And we need the public's input. I really think that we can't chart a path that doesn't bring people up to speed on, you know, to where things are.
Right.
And
I think we've been getting a lot of input. We've been getting a lot of emails. So but the question is, there's nothing that we can feed the public right now until, which I would love to do. I'm pushing ahead with the East Milton overlay. I love the idea of having public input, but until, you know, we have people who are coming and saying the regulations are law right now, and it's very, I think it's been very confusing. I think the ADU process has been very confusing. I think the MBTA, the fact that the regulations were found by the SJC not to be legal and enforceable. I don't even know if they are properly promulgating right now the new guidelines, the new regulations, because they're asking for an action plan, and this was a big piece of our discussion. They were asking for an action plan before the comment period is over. So does that mean they're just ignoring comments? They wanted us to submit an action plan based on regulations which have not been finalized and have not been properly promulgated. So this is, you know, I would love to move forward with something. I would love to have a definite, this is what we are. But we don't have.
But we do have something. What we were doing in the zoning that passed previously, looked at having some areas of lower density and some areas of higher density, averaged out to 15 units an acre.
Right.
But what you've described in your action plan as meeting the statute is 15 units an acre, and within a half a mile of a commuter rail station.
It's taking what the statute says.
What does that look like? Where is that? Which properties are affected? Which property owners need to be up to speed on what that means? Because we can't wait until zoning's written and then take it to the public and say, by the way, this is the best plan, I hope you like it. They need to be a part of the discussion.
Absolutely, right.
And we can't wait
another
month to decide.
We would not move forward without having
forum.
a discussion on that. And in many ways, I think what we know is in the statute, but it would be almost an adjacent community because we would get to choose where we put it, where we put a higher density.
But the statute says a half a mile of the commuter rail stations. It doesn't give you flexibility. The guidelines are what give you the flexibility.
But if you look at the Blue Hill Ave,
That's what I was.
the Blue Hill Ave commuter rail, half mile actually extends into one of our districts, which is into Unquity House that we've already looked at. So
it also goes into Capon, which is the Elliott Street corridor.
So we have
the Blue Hills Parkway corridor.
Yeah. So we have already started looking at and some zoning for that area. So I think we've already have a good little start.
But the problem is, if we follow the logic of you're only going by the statute, 15 units an acre, what does that start to look like on those parcels? Because it's different now. You take single family lots and you're saying you're going to rezone those for 15 units an acre. That's a lot different than the Elliott Street corridor where it's single family lots and it's capped at 3, or perhaps if we change this to 4. So, and then does that mean you're going to bump up Unquity House? Because you don't have to, you can keep it at 15, but you're not being I don't think you can pick and choose which of the guidelines you think are proper.
I know, that's why I'm not. That's why we're not doing that.
That's why our plan at this time was not to until we have finally properly promulgated
So it's not to
regulations.
work on zoning until the 90-day period's over?
No, I think we'll know if the discussions with the state, how the state discussions go. I think we still need some clarity on if these are regulations that are going to be finalized. We probably, the 21st, I don't know how soon we'll have them, but I would say.
They're going to be finalized?
I don't know how soon after the comment period that they'll be finalized. I know they will be finalized. I just don't know how soon after the comment period that they'll be finalized. I feel like it still
How
fits into our
soon was
timeframe.
the ADU finalized after the comment period?
Yes.
It was fast.
It was
like 2 weeks.
fast, yeah.
And I would
Right.
predict this would be the same.
Yes, yeah.
We could work on a 10% plan.
Yeah.
From what we understand, that's the discussion that is being had with HLC.
And we were directed by the select board to work on a 10% plan.
I think
That's
that
what
would
the
be,
chair said
yeah, I think that would
the
be,
other night.
and I think we could pull that together pretty quickly.
But I think, again, it's sort of-
Something will, the regulations, something will
I think
finalized.
we should work on a 10% plan, but we should also work on the 25%, as we talked about. And I think coming back to, well, I really feel like this public part of this should happen sooner rather than later. And we have to figure out what the best way to have that public input. I don't think these meetings are the best way when you have a public comment period. You know, when Tim was doing the zoning, he had monthly sessions. Some were in person and some were on Zoom. I think it would be good to have an in-person session, and maybe at the Council on Aging where something could be projected, maybe with maps that people could look at, you know, and understand the areas in which they're being discussed.
But I think we should have somewhat of a plan
Yeah, I think we
before,
should have a 10% plan and then show it
and
to the
then
public.
show that,
get
and
their
we can
feedback,
talk
just like we
about,
did with East Milton Square. We had a
Right.
public forum, we spent a lot of time on it, and now we're gonna have another one after the zoning is done.
Well-
Not that it can't be tweaked.
But the issue is people have made a lot of comments that we didn't get comments on the zoning that past town meeting until very late. And people became very concerned because once they understood what it was, they didn't, some people didn't like the choices that had been made, but they didn't feel as if they had an opportunity in advance to weigh in. So when we say adjacent community, does that mean it's tethered to the trolley? Is it tethered
So
to
the
the
way I
commuter rail
understand
station?
adjacent community is, it can go anywhere in town. It doesn't have to be within a half mile of the trolley.
But
But I think it should be,
Or commuter rail.
or commuter rail, right.
so, but, you know, I reread the guidelines today before I came, and those districts need to be something that HLC is going to approve.
Still
And
the
their
5
preference
acres.
is
Yep.
close to the public transportation. So we need to have conversations with folks about where.
So what do you mean, the HLC's preference is to keep it near the commuter rail, but it can go anywhere in town?
Yeah, I don't think it can go anywhere in town if you,
I think an adjacent community, the way I understand it is it can, but
So you're confusing. This is kind of the problem.
Okay.
Let's just focus on the statute. The statute, and I know I've been saying this for, 3 years, and I think that's a great starting point. Focus on the statute. Let's look at the areas within the half a mile of our commuter rail, and then we get that down. So we've met the terms of the statute, and then we look at the next bump up. If we are determined to be an adjacent community, then we can bump it up. It's easier for us to kind of agree on a smaller amount, because I think we all have a pretty good understanding where we would like to see some development in town. There's opportunities in town. start with a smaller amount and then slowly add to it.
I don't understand, how we're going to determine how we're compliant without fitting the criteria that has been established by HLC and the guidelines, other than if what you're talking about is a flat 15 units an acre. And I think that needs to be sort of understood. One thing if we think about other comments to HLC, which is a letter, comments would have to go in next week. What we could comment on really is what we learned from the rapid transit work that we did. And, I personally think that we ran into challenges with the minimum subdistrict size of 5 acres.
Yes, that was going to be one of my comments.
And if the board doesn't plan to submit a comment letter, I do plan to submit comments myself, that would ask for that to be lowered. We also, I think, heard concerns about not losing businesses and impacting our business districts. And there's a cap on how many units can be in a mandatory mixed-use district. And I think we should comment on that, and that we think that we should be allowed more. And then, to your point, Jim, about other places in town, have a comment about wanting to be thoughtful about where those places can be. And I think, being in a location which has access to MBTA bus line and other amenities, if they're not as great as some places like East Milton Square, but at least amenities, that those, I don't know if you all recall, but Tim had been given authority by the select board to ask if Granite Ave would be acceptable and East Milton Square would be acceptable, but he didn't ask about Randolph Ave sites, if those would be acceptable, because those were further away. And so a comment that I would like to have go back is we should get assurance that those could be acceptable locations, for reasons that we think that there's opportunity for some development on some of those parcels. So the 5-acre piece would get to the paper mill. It would get to 2 Granite Ave, because those by themselves are smaller than 5 acres. And then we didn't get to count all of what we would have liked to in the business district. So I think that could be quite a beneficial comment. And then this other piece about the locations.
I have 2 thoughts. If we should find out if the select board are submitting comments, because I think we don't want to have conflicting comments coming from various different boards. So either I would say possibly submit your comments to Nick Milano.
Well, Nick just sent us an email.
Yeah.
Oh.
But the select board is submitting comments, and Nick's asking for comments as well.
Oh,
He said that we could either submit together or separately.
Yeah, there's a letter that he sent that's drafted, and he's asking for comments.
Did he include his letter in that email?
He did, yeah.
All right, so I think that maybe we should send our comments to him. I don't mind you, Cheryl, sending as an individual either, if you want to send your own comment letter.
And also, I'd like to increase our affordability. Because right now, the guidelines,
and they require you to
10%.
pay a consultant, an economic development consultant, to verify that you can do that. It would be nice not to have to pay more money, to simply increase it within a certain margin.
Because the crisis is for affordability, and we all know, we've discussed that this has nothing to do with affordability. And we are desperately trying to create more housing that is affordable. So I think that they should be willing to increase it from 10% up to something higher. Also, we've talked about smaller, if we're allowing for smaller development, we've talked about how there's not enough profit for the developers to do one affordable unit if it's three units. There's not enough money in it, so they're not going to do it. So the other question is, in lieu of getting a full affordable unit, maybe there could be a payment to our affordable housing trust. And I think it should be tied to like the assessment of it or the sale of it, a certain percentage, not just a dollar amount, but a percentage.
value of the
an
property.
actual, yeah. So then it could fluctuate. The
Contribution.
the contribution to the Affordable Housing Trust is really dependent on what the sale price is. So if the market is a little bit softer, we're not sort of hindering the developer from maximizing their asset. And if the market is a little bit stronger, then they're contributing a higher percentage to our Affordable Housing Trust.
Well, you know that they cap it at 20% even with the economic development study, in part because they don't want to make it financially inviable
Right.
to do these
Yeah.
projects. And, you know, the differential on a market rate unit to sell versus a affordable unit is, last I spoke was to Connolly's at 131 Elliott, it was a $500,000 differential. So if you're going to make up that $500,000, you need a lot of places to make it up and a lot of units. And that's why you see the 40Bs try and push as many units as they can, because they're trying to make up that differential. So, you know, I think whatever percentage, I think this is something we did talk about when we were working on the zoning, to try and get some kind of a contribution in for the smaller development. So I think it's a good thing to put out there to them.
So I would send your comment, I think you should send your comments to Nick. I think anyone should maybe forward your comments to Nick. With Cheyenne being out and having the flu right now and the deadline for the comments being the 21st, I think it would be more efficient to send our comments or draft our own letter if folks feel inclined, but to send comments and add it to Nick's.
Yeah, because we won't have enough time to meet. If we're meeting on the 20th and then we have to vote for like an official planning board letter, is that what your fear is we're not going to have enough time to do that?
Well, I think their plan is to vote their comment letter before then. I think they're going to vote it on the 18th.
Okay, so we don't really have an option. So we have to just send it as
I
individuals.
mean, if we could discuss a letter on the 20th if we wanted to send one in on the 21st.
If they have a draft, if he has a draft,
He does. It's pretty.
yeah, I mean, but if he has our comments put into a final draft, we could vote on that.
So my only concern is if we send in individual comments, are our comments actually going to end up in the letter?
And the question is whether they're planning board comments or individual planning board member comments. And so,
Yeah, because if it's individual comments, the likelihood of them having to accept them and put them in their letter, they wouldn't have to.
well, they wouldn't have
compel.
to in either case, I think,
Yeah.
whether they're.
But at least it's a stronger,
I intend on signing mine, Jim Davis, planning board member, town of Milton.
Your comments.
yeah. I just would hope that they would incorporate our individual comments, knowing that we are under a time constraint, that we don't have a meeting before their next meeting.
It looks like their comments are focused on
Yes,
Charlie.
I haven't
read
seen
it,
it.
yeah.
When did he send it?
I haven't read it, but I just did a quick.
8:56 PM tonight.
It's probably
didn't read it.
best that that letter is from Nick to the select board and the planning board. It's probably best that we don't talk about that letter much more in this meeting.
Well, this is a public meeting and a public document. It's not executive session.
I don't remember, my batteries died, I can't read exactly how he had written it, but
Yeah, I mean, it'll be a public document once it's filed too. But I think if you don't feel as if we can come to a consensus about what the comments should be as a board in time for theirs, which I don't see how we could for their inclusion by the 18th.
Yeah.
That means we'd have to decide tonight. So then it's either we do our own comment letter or we do individual comments to HLC. I think that's really the option. I don't think there's really an option for us to have agreed
that's
upon
right.
comments
Yeah.
to the select board.
But if there's anything that we see that we think is important to add to Nick's letter too, that, I think you would.
Or would we send our comments to Cheyenne, and then Cheyenne collects them, and then she sends them saying, these are the planning board comments, so it looks a little bit more official than us just sending individual?
Except that they wouldn't be
Official.
discussed or...
Correct, we couldn't discuss it.
It wouldn't have been discussed in a...
Correct.
We'd have to,
It would be just individual comments. There would not be a board comment at that point.
right, and then we could review it on the 20th.
I just want to remind you guys that
I mean, I think
Monday is a holiday.
Yeah, so if we wanted to do our own letter, I think then what you say makes sense, Maggie, is to circulate comments to Julie and Cheyenne to put together, and we could, and on the 20th, we could decide whether we could agree on those or not and submit a planning board letter, or then if we can't, then individually, you know, submit our comments.
That's good. All right, so everyone will send comments to Cheyenne and Julia, and then put those all
Sorry,
together.
we send them to Julia, and then she edits them, and then we get them back and vote on them, or no?
No, we don't have time for
Julia,
that.
she edits them and then just sends them in?
We'll review it.
I don't even know if she edits them.
Okay.
We just send it to her.
So we send our comments, she puts it in the form of a letter? Or we all send
Yes.
letters, and
Yeah,
then she just sends them all in at
She
once?
would put it
like-
in a,
And just say, these are the comments I've received from planning board members, and then submit it to the select board.
Okay. Okay. Do we also reserve the right to write our own letter?
yeah, you certainly can, as an individual. I don't even think she would send it to the select board probably will have already submitted their letter, though.
Yes, yeah, I think that's...
It would go directly to HLC.
So what we would, I think if we wouldn't have time
Yeah.
to have, unless you wanted to send comments, but if they're going to vote on Monday, Tuesday, and Monday's a holiday, I think giving us a day on the comment letter is probably just informational at this point,
Yeah.
even though the email says submit. So,
Well, that's unfortunate. We weren't included prior.
but I do think, if we think about the things that we are more uniquely experienced with, like we talked about earlier with these guidelines, because if they come back and keep us rapid transit, at least we will have commented on the things that we found challenging in applying the guidelines here. And
I agree.
it will improve our ability to do the zoning if they make those changes.
Very much so. Yeah, okay.
So, I think it's
Good thing about your
stronger
point,
if it
yeah.
comes from us as a board that way than individually. And, people, if we have things that we don't agree on, that we want to send individually, fine. But at least on the things that we think that
Feel
we can
strongly,
agree
yeah.
on, like, I think that what you said about affordability, I think what I said about the other things, it seems like we have agreement on those. If there's anything else,
I think HLC would be hard pressed to consider individual comments. They need a board. So I agree with you. It should be board comments. I'm not sure how they're ever gonna, deal with individuals, but
and I think,
it's just my own opinion. At some point, I think that they
So can we just take a
limits to
vote
what they
right
can
now that we support adding a quick, increase in affordability, a decrease in district size?
the
Increasing
the cap on the units that are allowed in a mandatory mixed use.
Yeah.
And allowing the sub-districts to be along an area served by an MBTA bus line
And,
And less than 5 acres?
yeah, less than 5 acres and a monetary contribution.
on the less than 10. But I think we capped it Well, I mean, we had said that we thought that the affordability would kick in at 10 units, I think.
That's right.
So I think we said anything less than 10, we'd like a contribution,
Yeah.
so.
So those are like 5 things, are those 5 things we just, did you get that, Julia?
Julia?
There's more.
Poor Julia.
We can send them to you, too.
I've already started
Yeah.
to write the 3 that I mentioned.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was planning to put a little map from one of UTIL's presentations in to kind of graphically, kind of show, so they can visualize the constraints that we were up against and show that we were actually studying them. Like that, the mapping would show that we studied them. So I'm close to that. So if you wanted to write something up on the affordability, I think we could have a draft ready to review and vote on next week if you
Yeah,
wanted.
I think that would. Does that sound good, Julia?
Yeah, but we need to submit it by Tuesday.
No, we're going to
Isn't
submit
it-
separately.
We're going to say, okay, you want to submit separately? Okay.
Yeah, I
that's
think
what you
The
wanna do.
planning board will do their
Oh,
own.
okay.
That's.
Okay.
And I think, well, the things that we just talked about agreeing to, I think the select board, we can see what their letter says, but they will probably address different things.
Right. They're
It
probably
does.
more big picture.
Yeah.
It does. I don't know how what we just talked about is going to fit into the letter that I
Right.
read. I just don't think
Yeah,
it will.
so we should keep ours.
Yeah.
Ours are more technical because that's the
Right.
level that, and those are more of an
And I think they'll
overview.
show that we've been grappling with how to comply. And I don't think that's a bad thing, to demonstrate that we have.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay.
Okay. We are in agreement on that. So,
So I just one last thing, just
yeah.
agreement on when we're going to engage the public on a time frame.
I would like to,
We know we have town
Right, to a
meeting
map.
come up. We know we have East Milton Forum coming up. We're going to have a May town meeting, so
I just don't know what we
think we
would.
should get something on a calendar.
An opinion that I'll offer, it would be the engagement we had from the public happened after they had something to consider, right? Something that was developed that they could consider.
Yeah, Tim had a monthly the whole time, before we had any zoning to consider. And it just brought people up to speed. And, I think there's a lot of uncertainty about where Milton is in this right now. And so I don't think we have to show any districts. We can basically say where we think we are, what we think we're going to do next, and how we want to address two different paths, knowing that the outcome is still of what our classification may still be open. I have my doubts about that myself. But I think what we could say is, these are the 2 directions, and we should put some parameters on what we think, how we would approach it. And we would have to discuss that. I don't think we have to decide that tonight. But if we set a forum up for a month or so from now, we will have time to discuss it. We were going to have UTIL do a presentation in November. They were preparing a presentation for that. And it was going to just bring people up to speed on what we had looked at to date there.
So we also have to remember, Tim had those meetings because nobody knew anything, like nothing. No one even knew MBTA zoning, so a lot of it was just getting.
A lot of people still don't know it very
Getting
well,
caught
Maggie.
up, including
No,
like
after that last
ourselves,
town
we had
election, I
so
think a
many
lot of people know a
questions.
lot more.
So I think we're a little bit further along in the process than we were
We're
last
definitely
year.
further along, but there were.
However, I do think we should have a forum. Should it be the end of March, or should it be the end? If we have March 6th is East Milton, and then we have a meeting the next week after March 6th. So maybe it would be
How about we have zoning for
town meeting for May.
something in July or even May?
Yeah.
I mean,
Or
May
July,
or
yeah.
July, if we don't get the process going. And so my feeling is, if we have to, I spoke about this a lot in the last year that we need to have a map out a schedule.
So
And
why don't we say early April? We'll think about early to mid-April.
So it gives
I just
us
don't know-
March, it gives us March to at least come up with
Don't forget their school vacation
a
in
tentative
in
plan.
April.
So after school vacation?
No, I think
End of
it should be
April.
before.
Before.
How would you even have anything ready for, before July if you don't even engage the public until the end of April?
So if you look at May and June, you could have 2 public forums in May and June, so that's a total of 4 public forums. Just,
Well, that's just, you would have to have
Or
your zoning
hearings,
written by
yeah,
then.
but, yeah.
You would, I mean, you would have to have submitted it before then. If you're going to have a hope of getting it in July, you need to get, I think, I mean, we should be
April,
looking
that's
at
what
the
I
end of March, I think.
At that point, all we would be able to present is all the different districts that we've potentially
Exactly.
looked at. Is that what you're
Yes.
wanting to go in? But
Yeah. And
people are
then-
going to say, well, what are you going to do with those districts?
Right.
What is
You
your
wanna
plan?
present
What is your?
something. I think,
I feel like I want, to- yeah. I
No,
want it to
because
be-
here's the thing. If you said, we can adjust what was previously approved as a rapid transit community by taking some zone capacity out of East Milton and putting it where? One option is to put some more in the Elliott Street corridor. Another is to put it in a district on Randolph Ave. You don't have to have everything ironed out. That's a general concept. What do you think about that concept? You might have people in the Elliott Street corridor wonder, well, how much more? And what does that look like? And so we'd have to have some answers, but we do because we've looked at it.
so we should work it out as a board first. before
So
we
for example,
go
I
forward
think
with a
the
forum.
25% rapid transit, we have options for, and we can take that to the community. What we don't have the options for really are the adjacent or the statute. So we would need to spend some time thinking about that between now and then. But even then, we don't have to have it all ironed out. We could say, here's the areas that are within a half mile of the commuter rail. The largest one is near Blue Hill Ave, which overlaps with the trolley, and we think this is a good area to concentrate. And just start the conversation with people before we say, yeah, that's it, this is the district. And we used 20 grand of UTIL's time, and we have to backtrack.
If we could get as far along with 10% as we have with 25%, I think then we'd be in a good place. You're right about 25%. We know what our options are. We've discussed some of the changes that you just mentioned. We've done plenty of work on 25. We've done no work on 10, none.
We've done, we know where the zones are within the commuter rail. And I said in the email that I sent all of you, where that action plan was attached, I think we should focus around the Blue Hill Ave because of the overlap with the trolley. And I think we could, if we're meeting with UTIL on the 13th, is that when they're coming next?
We haven't scheduled them yet.
Well, we should schedule them because we can start talking to them about that area.
in the paper mill.
And the paper mill, that's fine too. So if
I
we
think-
set
yeah.
ourselves a goal of a meeting, then we have to think from the end out. If we're really going to try and hit July, we need to jump on. That's why I was asking earlier about waiting a month to have a meeting. Because we need to start jumping on that alternative option and then have public input.
10%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would be-
My point is, I have no issue having a public forum, but we can't show them what 10% looks like if we have a public forum. What are we going to say?
Well, where do this board needs to discuss where.
That's my point. That's all I'm saying.
That's why I'm saying we can't wait a
my
month
point.
to have a
No,
meeting.
what you're saying is you want to have a public forum before we have something to show people.
No,
I'm
I said
saying we can have a public forum. The question's going to be, can you tell us what the 10% plan looks like? And what are we going to say?
What I'm saying is we set a date for a public forum and we work to get something to show for a 10% plan for that forum. We've had over a year.
That's fine,
We
Charlotte.
haven't done
So
anything.
what calendar would you like to do that on?
We have a month that we're talking about not having a meeting, right? And I'm asking when Util's coming next, and they're not scheduled. In fact, we have to talk about their contract next week.
So if we talk about their contract next week, I'm thinking we could have Util come on the 13th and discuss, and have them come prepared to start
Sure.
working. We could probably almost, if we get the person who can do things in live time, we could get a significant amount done on the meeting on the 13th on a 10% plan.
I
Right,
think that's
if you
fine.
ask them-
My point is, I think we absolutely should do that before, so we
Yeah.
can show the public something.
Right.
So I think we can ask them to work on,
And I'm happy to ask Cheyenne to schedule. She had said when, and this is all, I mean, it's been sort of with her now being out, but
Right.
I just didn't know what we were going to hear from the select board and what we were going to ask Util, and I just didn't want to start spending their money and time until we have it.
we don't know their availability either, so
We don't,
I
yeah.
would ask if Cheyenne's able to get in touch with them before the next week's meeting,
Yeah,
that we can see what their schedule looks like, and ask if they can begin to work on looking at the area
Yeah.
the overlap between the commuter rail and the Mattapan trolley, generally in the Blue Hills Parkway area. I have felt that we really didn't study the Parkway area as thoroughly as we should have before, and I think we can ask them to start looking at that before, and they can bring something to us the next time, so that
Right.
we
come
don't
in with
lose
it.
all the time in between.
I was going to, exactly. So I think having them come, that date would be great. And we could have it,
Yeah,
And
so
so-
I don't think a whole 10% plan should be around the Blue Hills
But we
Parkway
can
area.
discuss that.
Yeah,
It's
I know
now
we can.
10:08.
Yeah. No, I get it, but I don't
yeah,
want
I
to
think
just,
we'll, based on some of our options that we've been looking
Yeah,
at.
I
but
think-
exploring that is one of the options, but
Yeah, it's just, it was the largest area, and it's an overlap of 2 transit assets, so it seems a good place to start. And
But there's also extra space storage, which is
yeah,
great.
there's the
like
whole
we're-
village, there's,
we already know all of those, though, what we could do with those
I know.
is
But
my
I'm saying,
point.
if what we want to present I think that would be an option, but let's, try to see how far they could get in pulling something together. But I hear what you're saying. We should have them definitely explore that, because that's an area we haven't fully maybe looked at closely enough.
yeah, my feeling is if you look at Ketch's Law and you look at Granite Ave North and you look at the village and you look at Elliott Street, by the time you get to Blue Hills Parkway, if you include Unquity House, I mean, you're there, you're at 10%.
Well,
All right.
And add Randolph
Let's
Ave
not-
from the
may
line.
not
Let's
meet
not try to
other,
do it tonight.
We're not doing, yeah.
Just did it.
We're at 10 o'clock, so 10 after 10. So I think that's great. So I will reach out, we'll find out Util's availability, and ask them to come. And if they, I'll have them, we'll put out some dates, so. And I don't want to keep adding other dates, but if they couldn't come that week of the 13th, we could consider having just an MBTA
That's what we should do.
meeting.
we should do
That's
that
what-
the
that's
week
exactly what we
before.
should do.
On the week before. And maybe take the 6th on, and say, let's just see if they're available on the 6th, and just do MBTA only.
And if we do that,
If
then-
they can't do the 13th.
And if we do that, we can let the public know that there's going to be ample opportunity for them to listen, learn, and
Right.
provide comment
Yep.
in advance of a bigger public forum.
Yeah.
Because the problem that people have is when it's a piece on the agenda, they don't know when it's going to be. Is it at 8 o'clock or 10 o'clock, and how much time is going to be devoted to it? It's hard to get people to put it into their calendar. If they know it's a meeting that's dedicated to the topic, then I think it's much easier.
Agreed. Makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
So,
Bye, Maggie.
Great, thank you so much. That was a good discussion, because certainly we will be compliant by July. We'll be done. Thank you, Maggie. Have a good night. That's good.
Good night, Maggie.
Okay, and so the last item on our agenda is the Thayer Nursery Special Permit discussion. this is, our public hearing is closed, so thank you, sorry about that. The public hearing is closed on this, so we have our, sort of the draft, and Cheryl, you had some edits. Julia, did you have something?
Yeah.
Is that Julia?
Yeah, I think somebody was just talking to her.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, that's
here.
all right.
What, do you want me to bring up the permit?
Is that
I
helpful?
printed
We all
copies on
we
you.
all have a copy now, so actually, Cheryl, do you want to go through?
But I think
just-
for the public, it would be
Helpful.
beneficial to have it on the screen. And then,
Pull it up, Julia.
I do have one question, and I have one comment, but whenever you guys are ready.
so the yellow is where I had a question.
Yeah.
And the red, edits are where I changed, made a couple changes.
Well, we may have a similar question.
All right, go ahead, you ask first.
Okay. Yeah, this is just, I think, writing it in a way that's reflective of how it should be written. So under findings, which is section 4, and you go over to paragraph C, and in yellow, which Cheryl, you highlighted, and the restriction that the business cannot be sold to any new owners, including the children of Maggie and Josh Oldfield. I think it should just say Maggie, the children of Maggie or Josh Oldfield. Because I don't think it's likely that Maggie and Josh Oldfield are having children.
But also, I had a question about that, or not so much direct as yours. Mine had to do with, let me see.
I do
Yeah,
think
an
that language is necessary. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
we have an attorney
Yeah.
here that, someone could question that later and say, well,
Well, I even question the existence of the sentence in there.
Okay.
Because on page 9, under 8, transfer of property, it says that in the event that the property and/or landscaping business shall be transferred to a third party, that seems to mean that you can sell it. Because in that case, then that third party has to seek to continue operation of landscaping business on the property, then a new application is required. So if that's the case, then how can you say it can't be sold elsewhere?
well, I mean, it does say, I'm sorry, if you're there on 8, in the event that the property and/or
But-
landscaping business, so the property could be sold, right?
But the landscaping business could too in that sentence. So can I just ask a clarifying question then of Marion about whether there's a inconsistency in these two provisions? Do you see that as a inconsistency?
The first provision just draws attention to the fact that it's a very limited permit that's only able to be used by the children of Margaret and Robert Oldfield, and those two children who are currently using the permit are Maggie and Josh Oldfield. So there's no one eligible to use this permit after Maggie and Josh Oldfield decide they no longer want to operate the landscaping business.
But if they sold the business, somebody else could apply for a permit
But they
under
wouldn't be eligible, because this particular
Meredith,
permit,
can you get to a microphone, please?
Yep, sorry.
this particular permit is limited by the original nursery permit. The nursery permit was issued personally to Robert and Margaret Oldfield. So
there's
the
no.
way this bylaw is written, the way the landscaping bylaw is written, it's tied to 2012 operation of a landscaping business, and it's tied to the way that landscaping business and nursery business was permitted in 2012. The permits for their nursery were issued many years ago, but they were issued personally to the parents because of the very sensitive, I think, because of the sensitive location of this business. And so that limitation on the nursery permit becomes a limitation on this permit, on the landscaping permit. And so the reality is that you cannot continue this landscaping business beyond well, I say the working life of Maggie Oldfield, of any child of Margaret and Robert Oldfield.
So then,
So it's maybe,
so then is this a?
the other language, the second paragraph, that's taken directly from the language in the 2016 special permit.
Okay.
So it's just general language saying that, if someone does want to buy the business or they want to operate the nursery, they have to apply for another permit. Except that it turns out in this case, there isn't going to be anybody who's eligible to apply for it. And I think, well, it's important for everyone to realize that.
Well, that's why it's confusing to me that it implies on page 9, section 8, that it can be done.
Well, that's the second paragraph, right?
The transfer of
second paragraph
property.
says, I get my glasses. The second paragraph says, but they have to be eligible to apply for the permit.
But then you're saying that nobody's eligible, so.
Well, that's true.
So it's just, it seems confusing to me.
Now, I'm aware of those two sections, and I realize you might find them confusing, and if you'd like to, you could take out the first, the permit. Whatever, take out the first one, refers specifically to Maggie and Josh. It's just an interesting fact about this permit, that it is not something that can continue indefinitely.
Well,
Should we just take out the transfer of property?
I think we should just take out that whole section, transfer of property.
Because that's going to be up to the, yeah.
Well, first of all, you can take it out because what you're doing here is you're incorporating by reference all of the findings and all of the conditions in the 2016 special permit.
Right.
You've already incorporated them.
Right.
So if you prefer not to
strike
include
it.
that paragraph.
I would just strike.
And it is
Okay.
confusing, I understand that.
Okay, thank you, Mary.
And since we didn't list everything in the 2016 permit here, the question will be, well, why did you choose to list that?
Right, it makes it more.
All right, thank you. All right, so the other thing that
Take it.
I say while you're here, just because what I thought seemed contradictory. On page 3, number 7, it says there are no wetlands on the premises, and then it continues. And then on page 7, letter H, it says the wetlands delineation and drainage plan remains in compliance, etc. So if there's no wetlands on the premises, then isn't it just a drainage plan?
Well, the plan is a wetland, it's a wetlands delineation plan and drainage plan, that's what it's called.
But if there's no wetlands, then there should be nothing on that plan that's related to wetlands, if there's truly no wetlands on the premises.
Well, there could be wetlands off the premises that are shown.
Okay, all right,
Because there's a lot of drainage that comes onto this property from property above.
all right,
And
okay,
again.
all right. That's fine then.
That's the reason for
Okay,
that. It is a little bit
Okay,
contradictory.
yeah, I was, again, just confusing, but I understand there could be something off property. All right. Thanks, Mary.
This is testimony that was given at the hearing by the
Those were-
applicants. Yeah.
Okay.
So if you can leave it out if you want, but it was testimony that
Thank
was
you.
given at the
Okay,
Okay.
all right, so then on page, if you want to go through my
Yeah.
on page 5, the letter was signed by
The building commissioner.
commissioner, yeah.
Yeah.
And our interim building commissioner. And then on page 9, we had this, like, being clear about the engineer in other permits.
Yeah, I thought the same thing when I read this too, so just,
And-
that's.
yeah.
Is it licensed or registered? Which is do you know which term is right? Or are they interchangeable?
I always think of myself as a registered architect, but I guess I'm licensed to practice in Massachusetts and other states, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's interchangeable or not,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know? This is the language we had in the memory care, I think,
Okay, then we'll leave it alone.
or
Yeah.
definitely in another permit.
And in our site plan approval.
Yeah. And then I thought in C here that, I know this was something of concern to neighbors, so I'm just going to read what this provision is about these are the decision with some of the conditions. And as Marion said, the conditions in the other permits are all included by reference. And then this provision, so I'm just going to run through these because of public interest. A, it says, by July 1st of 2025, the applicant shall have their drainage system inspected by their choice of either their engineer, who shall be a Massachusetts licensed civil engineer, or a Town of Milton engineer. The inspecting engineer shall attest that the drainage system is operating as designed by providing a letter to that effect to the planning board. Prior to application for any renewal of this special permit, the applicant shall again have their drainage system inspected by their choice of either the town engineer or their own engineer. Do we need to make that same change here? Shall be licensed? Do you think?
You might as well put it in.
Yeah, I would say, yeah.
So I don't know if
Same.
Julia, if you can just
To add-
copy it down to the next, that
Building
other
engineer,
line.
who shall be a Massachusetts licensed civil engineer.
They wanted to go where?
Just
We're going to
copy
copy
that,
copy it.
Okay.
and then put it down, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down from there after the words their own engineer.
Yep, right there, after that, yeah.
And the inspecting engineer shall attest that the drainage system is operating as designed by providing a letter to that effect to the planning board. So what this does is by July 1st of this year, and then at the renewal times, again. So that's what we spoke about, but that's included there. And then in letter B, the applicant shall remove posts remaining from the relocation of the sound attenuation fence to ground level. C, any evergreen landscaping that is in poor condition along the Parkwood Drive lot line shall be replaced with similar plantings at the next available growing season, such that the plantings provide visual screening and dust control. Is it only evergreen plantings though, or is it plantings in general?
I think it's all evergreen landscaping.
Okay.
Because it's designed to block view
Buffer.
all year round. So
Okay.
that's my recollection anyway, and so that's why it's
Okay.
specifically evergreen.
Okay,
It
and then-
doesn't just mean tall trees, it
Right.
can mean smaller bushes, but they're evergreen.
And then D, this special permit is for a term of 3 years from the date of this decision.
I just have a thought, just because we don't have clarity on size of these plantings. Now, maybe similar plantings means not only similar in plant species, but similar in size. But for the benefit of this, do you think we should say that they should be replaced with similar plantings
Similar
of
size.
similar size or greater?
Sure.
Well, I thought of that. I mean, what if arborvitae's grow to be 20 feet high? How are you going to replace a 20-foot-high arborvitae?
That's true, too.
You know?
I mean,
Because
some
things
of
are,
it-
I mean, I walked back there. Things are growing pretty well
This
back
language
there.
was in the 2019 renewal permit, again, to provide a little clarity about when you had to replace plantings.
Yeah.
Again, those conditions are incorporated by reference into this decision, but because this is a specific topic of discussion during your hearing, it's a specific condition. And it brings attention to the fact that there were complaints that some plantings along that lot line have died or are
Yeah,
not in good
yeah.
condition, and that they must be replaced by the next planting season. So the issue about exactly what they should be it's actually in the
Is in the original.
it's in the conditions for in 2019, that it can be something similar. And the reason for that is you might plant one thing in 2016, it turns out it doesn't do that well in that shady location. You shouldn't have to plant the same plant over and over again and have it die.
Okay.
You want to plant something that's pleasing in the sense that it provides the protection and is nice to look at. And so that's why you say similar. You don't say exactly the same, and you don't say exactly the same size either, because you're planting something new
Well-
and it's going to grow.
And I thought the clarifying language here is we want to make sure it provides the screening and dust.
Yeah.
So
Right, that's.
That implies a certain size, too, doesn't it?
certain size and
Yeah,
a certain
right.
closeness and
Yeah,
certain,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
how filled out it is, right?
Yeah, that's probably better than any other stipulation on size.
Because then if something else dies, then, and it doesn't provide screening,
Yep.
then they need
That
to
makes sense.
put it back in.
Okay, that makes sense.
So I
You
think
want,
those,
you want to get rid of the similar size or greater?
yes, I think so.
And then we want to eliminate the transfer of property.
Yeah, the whole paragraph
section,
8.
not 8.
There's no section 8
that's
anymore.
8.
You want all this gone?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you can remove the highlights that I put in, I think in a few places, Julia.
Yes, I'm there.
Yeah, that's okay. So
That's good.
did anybody else have any?
You guys hit the,
think it
you guys addressed the,
All right, so then will you take a motion, Meredith?
yes, I would entertain a motion.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve the special permit for landscaping business use and site plan approval for 270 Hillside Street and 0 and 24 Forest Street. Joshua Oldfield and Maggie Oldfield applicants, as written in the decision, reviewed and edited tonight.
I'll second that.
Okay. Before we take a final vote, are we sure on page 5 that we put in building commissioner in there? Julia, did you catch that?
Oh yeah, we want to make sure that's there.
Interim building commissioner.
Yes.
Interim building commissioner
page
rather
5.
than inspector.
Oh, and there's some other
I
highlights.
think so.
Yes, it's in there. Okay.
Yeah.
That was from your edits. Okay, great. And then we'll unhighlight the other
Just
language.
accept all the
Yeah.
changes.
And
too.
accept all the changes, yeah. Great. So we have a motion and a second. Great, I just wanted to make sure we were.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to just, I think before we sign it, we can just make sure that those things are in there, incorporated properly.
Okay, so motion, second, then a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Thank you all. Thanks.
Meredith, how will that decision, do we need to come and sign it at some point?
We'll need to come sign, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And Julia will let us know when it's ready for signature.
Yes, and it has on the back of the decision at the bottom. Bye, thank you, good night.
Thank you.
At the bottom, it's just the 4 of us signing,
Yeah, okay.
but we'll come in and sign.
Okay.
So I don't know if we'll have it
We'll have it.
Maybe
at the next meeting.
next meeting, maybe, right?
The next meeting, we could possibly sign it, so.
I can print it out right now if you want, because the next meeting is remote.
Are you
that's
are you
true.
in the office, Julia?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's sign it before we leave.
Yeah,
Right.
let's do it.
We'll come-
If you don't mind, Julia, that'd be great.
Sure.
I don't think
Talk
we,
about efficient tonight. You could go. Got a lot done. Okay. All right. Good night. Yeah, Julia, that's great. If we can print it. And then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second?
Seconded.
All in favor? Aye. Okay.